Good morning. Well, we've got some work to do. Working on the cartoon. Gotta get some work done. The Animation Truman Show here on Blended Planet YouTube channel, where we not only have the wonderful fun of creating a cartoon, but we also have the additional thrills and chills and spills of talking about all kinds of fun and interesting and sometimes controversial topics, which apparently has been to some degree a source of entertainment for some of the people who come here. It's certainly entertaining for me. So, for those who don't like it when I just jump in and start live streaming without any warning, I apologize. I don't mean to ruin your day. But I just do what I do. I just do what I do, friends. I'm having a great time doing it. So I'll just keep plugging along here. Boom, 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 boom. I have to make sure that one's pretty clean-ish because this is one of those frames that we're going to be sitting on for about a second. So sometimes you can get away with being a little sloppier here at the connection points. Sometimes you can't. Just depends on how fast things are moving. So I'm going to sit here and just do my thing until some friends begin to show up. And then we will maybe get into today's controversial topics. Because there's a doozy. There's a really good one that I found quite entertaining in regard to the California recall vote. A sequence of events that I'm sure have left the Trumpers scratching their heads a bit. And for me, I must say that although I'm an avowed centrist, I do think that maybe that's a good thing. So, what the heck am I talking about? Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. But there were some very interesting happenstances surrounding Larry Elder's bid to unseat Gavin Newsom in California. That what I've noticed on Facebook is that my peeps who are avowed right-wingers have gone strangely silent. But I don't find it strange at all, because if I was in their shoes, I'd probably be inclined to do the same thing. Again, you might be sitting there going, what are you even talking about, Dave? What are you even talking about? I better check this on the... Yep, we're good. Checking to make sure this was not a non-fillable shape. Boom. Yeah, that's cool. So who's here? Like, nobody's here! What's going on with that? Oh, there's two people here. Two people just showed up. Glad to have you, whoever you are. Identify yourself. Identify yourself. And by the way, if Darren T is one of them, Darren, you're not allowed to steal my line. Identify yourself. Nope, you're not allowed to steal that one, buddy. That one's mine. Can't steal it. Actually, you can. I don't really care. I'm just being silly. Okay. So we're going to finish up the ink today on this scene, or shot. And then we'll be moving right along to inking the shot of Mel. Let's see here. What do we want to do here? Do we want to let that go down there or keep it more higher? I don't want to have that more higher, right? Isn't that great English? Let's flip this around so I can get a fresh view Always good advice, friends. Flip, 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 flip your canvas. You will thank yourself later. I just need to make sure that's fillable. Okay, so now what we have, okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to hit the S key. I'm going to grab everything that I know for a fact doesn't move or change. Control C, Control V. Here, let me see. Yeah, I think we'll, hold on, timeout. Okay, I guess on this particular cell, I sort of went ahead and assumed I was going to go ahead and ink that one independently. I'm going to go ahead and onion skin that so I can just kind of see where I'm supposed to be. There we go. So, again, unfortunately, it appears that the animation Truman Show just isn't that popular. There really aren't actually that many people around who want to watch the very unglamorous process of just doing the hard work. Some do, and I love that. And if you don't, I don't blame you. Frankly, I don't know if I'd want to sit and watch this for 4 hours or whatever it's going to be. But at the same time, it's kind of the reason I started doing it was because I did want to see it, and really there was nobody on YouTube that was doing it. Usually people do it in a little smarter way than me, meaning they'll do something like create maybe a speed paint video. That's a teaser in essence, you know, that would maybe link to the full length long form version of it. And I think that probably is, if your goal is to grow your YouTube channel, that's probably a better strategy. I cannot argue. Oh, it's nice getting new subs and seeing the channel grow a little bit, but that's not ultimately my real objective. That's just a side effect of my actual goal, which is, whoops, I'm sorry about that. Meant to hit the S key, not the E key. My real goal is to just create shows for traditional-ish distribution. Are we flipped right now? We're not flipped. Mr. Dyslexia here forgets whether I'm flipped. So, hey Tom. Meow Films. Hey, Meow Films. I don't remember seeing you, but hey, dude, you know, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so Tom, since you're here, do you want me to go ahead and get into today's controversial topic? Because I'd be happy to. I've got a doozy for you. You may not be aware of what happened in California with Larry Elder, but boy, was it funny. So you tell me, Tom. I'll let you have veto power today. And if you want me to, I'll talk about what happened in California. And if you want me to stay on the animation topic, because I'm going to keep working. Promise you that. But, again, what happened in California, I think especially for Trumpers, which I don't know if you're a Trumper, but, and again, I emphasize that I am a centrist. I do tend to lean left. Okay, you're half distracted cooking. I'll be cooking later today when we've actually spent 2 days sort of experimenting with different methodologies for making homemade tater tots, and we kind of got it down to a system. Figured out what we're going to do. So now on the 3rd day, we're going to be doing a batch with 100 trillion zillion potatoes that we grew in our garden. Okay, so here's what happened. Larry Elder, on his website, if you go to electelder.com, okay, certainly as of 2 days ago, I don't know when this began, but as of a couple days ago, and you can look it up on YouTube, you can see on MSNBC, Rachel Maddow talked about it. The story was confirmed by everybody. CNN, Bloomberg, The Hill, and Bloomberg doesn't particularly lean that left from what I've seen. Um, but obviously some of those sources that I just cited do, so let's accept the fact that that is a fact. However, what happened was Larry Elder posted on his website, electelder.com, had a tab on it called Stop Fraud. Okay. Well, if you were to look at it yesterday while the vote was going on, what the Stop Fraud tab said was it was basically like a kind of like a petition or an opportunity, a form you could fill out if you wanted to report something you had seen that was concerning about fraud. Okay. That's what was on the site yesterday. But guess what? What was on the site 2 days ago, before it got flagged, because he had a bit of a magnum opus posted, which was essentially a letter stating that Gavin Newsom had won the recall vote and would be retaining his position as governor, and that in essence it said we saw lots of signs of fraud, and it was explicitly asserting that not only had Elder lost his bid to unseat Gavin Newsom, but also the reason it had happened was because of rampant fraud that was going on throughout California in the voting. Well, it seems that this was something he had prepared in advance as his strategy for protesting what he felt was probably going to be a loss in the recall vote. Well, I don't think they meant to go live with it, but they did. And every news media, around very quickly, I think it was, as far as I know, I think it was Brian Tyler Cohen who probably picked it up in the first place. But yeah, so this became news, and then of course Gavin Newsom came out and did make a statement about it, like this is so outrageous, which it is, clearly. But yeah, Larry Elder actually he was seeing the future. He had declared a day before the vote that he had already lost the vote and that fraud was the reason. And again, I don't think he meant to go live with that necessarily. And so, in essence, he got busted. And lo and behold, what happened the next day? Well, of course, that page was gone. Right? Taken down. Replaced with a much more muted message, as I cited earlier, about reporting fraud if you see it, kind of thing. Now today, now that he actually has lost his bid, what's on his website, electelder.com, about fraud? For the first time, I would assume, probably in weeks. Guess what? There's no tab at all about stopping fraud. That's interesting. What happened here? Is it possible that after being outed for something obviously opportunistic, outrageous, that clearly reflects an utter and complete contempt for his most ardent supporters, because he thinks you're stupid and gullible, and he planned in advance to use that against you? To which, if you're an ardent right winger, you're going to say, "Oh no, Larry Elder, that man is a patriot. He would never do that. He would never use me. He would never treat me as a sucker that's nothing more than a pathway to power for himself. No, he wouldn't do that. He's a patriot." Well, he did. And I found it very interesting that on the day of the election, not only did every major news agency that I could find confirm the story. But in addition to that, I went to both Newsmax and, believe it or not, the Epic Times, which are about as Trumper as you can get. And what did I discover? A quick search, believe it or not, of Newsmax revealed on the politics page, where there's dozens of links to stories of current political whatever. On the day of the recall election, big deal, right? How many instances do you think I found on Newsmax of the word Newsom or Elder anywhere on the Newsmax politics page yesterday? Zero. Not a word. They went dead silent. Why would that be? Why would that be? Why would they just not? I mean, this major recall election in California and not one story about it? That doesn't make any sense. A good patriotic news source like Newsmax? I can't understand it. Well, yeah, we understand it. What took place was so brazen and so indefensible that Newsmax did the same thing my Trumper friend on Facebook does every time his political position becomes really obviously untenable. They go silent. They just go silent. The only thing I could find was on the Epic Times. I was able to find one story that basically just asserted, yeah, Newsom's got his work cut out for him defending his indefensible job that he's done as governor. That was the only thing I could find. Just one story on the Epic Times talking about how tough it was going to be for Newsom to win, which, by the way, what actually happened, he actually won handily, and it was obvious much earlier than expected that he was going to win. Okay, so now I'm going to be my centrist self. Tom, I agree with the sentiment behind your last comment completely. Absolutely. Nothing I am saying is in any way to be construed as a defense of the job that Newsom has done as governor. Not at all. I'm sure there's plenty we could criticize, okay? So you make no mistake about that. This is not about defending the job he's done. Not at all. This is about, I hope that the Trumpers who have been drinking the Kool-Aid will understand that the people they are supporting really view them with contempt. Really see them as suckers who are just a means to an end, a pathway to power. You know, it's like, you're so stupid, you'll believe anything I tell you. It's very clear that that's how they feel about the very people that are placing them in power. Well, so again, yeah, we could certainly talk about whether Newsom's done a good job or not, and I'm sure there's plenty to criticize. I'm actually not a student of that. Don't care to be at this moment. The socio-political dynamics of things like what Elder did are way more interesting to me because they're very revealing of the psychology behind both the candidates and the people who are voting for them. You know, what they're willing to believe and suspend their disbelief. And so now the interesting thing about that to me is, right, and I agree. Yep, left and right, it's all, that's right. That's right. We've only got so much time to spend, and that's why we choose our sources. You got to choose your sources. Who are you going to look to for your information? So the people that basically look at predominantly sources like Newsmax and the Epic Times have a very, very specific view of things that what I find ironic about it is, and I say this as objectively as I can, that it becomes really obvious that those who are the most concerned about fake news are generally the most victimized by it, actually. It seems really obvious to me that that's the case. Again, people might disagree. Now the question you would ask yourself is this. If someone's going to disagree, especially in the face of just overwhelming evidence that their position is maybe misguided. Let's just say as a given, let's assume that's the case. Let's pretend that we've got a belief about the way things are that is kind of falling apart. That's kind of being revealed to have some holes in it. Let's say that's the case. If that's the case, the question I would ask is, what would it be that would cause you to cling to that untenable position, even when it, really is pretty obvious that it's not very well defensible. It's only defensible peripherally, meaning, like your comment about the job Newsom's done as governor, right? Great comment, because that's what I mean by it's only defensible peripherally. In other words, you have to look the other way on the stuff that obviously doesn't add up in order to focus on the things that you still object to that in fact are legitimate objections. And those two things get conflated. So if you think that way, then you would come to the conclusion that, well, even if Larry Elder's a complete hoser, I'd rather have that guy at the helm because he thinks and believes the way I do. Now there's some, that's not a ridiculous, it's certainly not a ridiculous thing to feel, right? But, okay, we got to make a little tweakage here. But the question then for me becomes, is it basically true, going back to before and during and after the presidential election, that there is this Kool-Aid that a large number of people have swallowed that is increasingly being revealed to be let's just call it a scam that it is. And I think that is happening. I think what's going on right now is that V key, by the way, when we're doing areas, I think what's happening now is that when you talk about people who see themselves as patriotic or traditional, it is completely understandable that they have worries and concerns about what they see as their way of life being eroded. That fear is obviously legitimate. Nobody wants their way of life to be eroded. Well, the way that manifests in practical terms, and by the way, I know I need to get his wrinkles going here. Okay. The way that manifests in practical terms is that you have demographic changes that are taking place in the United States, which are causing a change in the population that happens to have the basic result of progressively minded people. There's just becoming more and more of them. So people who are concerned about their neighborhood being overrun with people of color, or even Muslims or whatever, those concerns in the sense that, well, I'm actually, for my own reasons, I'm worried that it's happening. We can get into all the specifics of what specific you're scared about in that, but bottom line is you're scared. Well, I don't want you to be scared. But we're in a climate right now where there's not much I could probably tell you to make you feel better, because the encroaching socio-cultural change is happening, has been happening, and is not going to stop. So if that worries you, what do? Well, you look at your base of political power in preserving what you see as your way of life as being really an important part of how you're going to keep your way of life from, changing in a way that you find egregious. Again, it's all understandable. And to be clear, most of my peeps on Facebook are in that camp. Actually, they really are. Let's see, let's dial that in. The question one might ask oneself, though, is, could it be that my fear, which is a legitimate fear, is actually being deliberately fed and propagated and amplified by actors who have a vested interest in me being scared? For me, the answer is pitifully obvious. It's very clear that that is happening. We have guys like Larry Elder that are out there saying and doing things that they know will seize upon your fears. He tells you in advance, this really happened, folks. He tells you in advance that he lost the recall vote. Okay, it was on his website before the vote ever happened. And that the reason was because we've seen, I'll tell you what the most egregious thing about it was, though. The most egregious thing about what Elder put on his website, that then, of course, was rapidly taken down once the news media got a hold of it. But if you were to read that, and if you go back to Rachel Maddow, say, look at her here on YouTube, you can look at Rachel Maddow's kind of recap. It's probably like a 20-minute long video where the first 5 minutes is about this particular topic. And you look at the where she went through the actual document on Larry Elder's website, electelder.com. The most concerning part of it is that, and I'll let you go and look into it if you want to. Just go watch Rachel Maddow from 2 days ago. The most egregious thing about it for me is that Elder clearly, indefensibly, was signaling to his base that if we lose, be prepared to take up arms. I'm not joking. You think I'm joking? Go check it out. I'm not kidding. He very clearly was signaling that. That if we lose, tomorrow at the ballot box, of course he didn't say that. He said we lost at the ballot box. He said it the day before the vote. Like, what's he, psychic? He sees the future? No. He had this story prepared in advance to tell you, his supporters, that the whole reason they lost was because of all the fraud they saw. So yeah, no big surprise that was quickly taken down off his website the next day. Well, it's like, what does that tell you? It doesn't mean that conservative values, are bad or anything like that. It does tell you that these guys that are running for office on Trump's coattails totally see the election fraud strategy as nothing more than that. You're so stupid you'll believe it. And so let's just use that because that's what helps us either get elected or challenge the vote when it doesn't go our way. And when you have such a brazen example of it as we saw in the last 2 days, then the response from the right-wing media was exactly what I would have expected. Exactly what I would have expected. Total silence. There's just nothing they can say. They're not even prepared to claim that it didn't happen, right? Nope, that's the wrong. Oh wait, that is right. Okay. They're not even going to claim it didn't happen. I need to flip this back again. Okay, stop. It looks to me, yeah, I want to make sure I get the shadows correct here. And so for me, I ask myself this question. Does it make you think? Does it make you think, well, you know what? Maybe this is what they've been doing to me all along. And I've been believing everything they told me. maybe I am being played for a sucker. I certainly hope that a lot of people in the Trumper camp come to that little awakening. Because the fact of the matter is, guys, if you're one of those people, which probably most of the people here aren't, but if you are, trust me, you've been played for a sucker in a big way over the last few months. And by the way, I say this also as an avowed centrist. You know what? It's perfectly understandable. You know, these guys, they're trying to get into a position of power. You know, I don't blame them. There's nothing wrong with trying to have power. There's nothing wrong with trying to win an office or whatever. There is something wrong with playing me for a sucker. People have vested interest, they falter, then their acolytes will no longer follow them. Well, and that's what I think is happening now. It's my opinion that what happened in California is a bellwether event, and it will not be recognized as such. It might later, history may tell us it was a bellwether event, but I think the reason it's a bellwether event, not just because of the duplicity in the right-wing candidate being flagrantly exposed for all to see. Not only that, but in addition, Gavin won. It was really obvious much more quickly than the pundits expected. It was really obvious that Newsom was going to hang on. And so that's why I see it as a bellwether event, because it's indicative that actually, especially in light of these new laws that have come down in strong red states like Texas, it's not enough. It isn't going to save their way of life in that respect, because you're going to see more and more of what we saw in Georgia. It was my contention way back when, there's no way Georgia should ever have gotten 2 Democratic senators. There's no way. How did that happen? Well, Trump made it happen. They woke up the sleeping giant, you might say, in terms of the the voters. And they came out, baby. And I don't think it matters what laws they pass in Texas. I think that the voters are going to find a way to comply with those laws, and by gum, cast their vote. So again, bellwether event, because we passed the point of no return. We are moving in a more progressive direction as a country in terms of just the policies that our population favors. It just is what it is. We go through seasons of this. We've basically had a Republican, well, let's not say Republican, let's say conservative, politically conservative, much conflated with, in my world, with white evangelical Christianity, by the way. But, it's just since Reagan, basically, we've had the right has pretty much held sway, for the most part, in terms of influencing policy. Not saying whether that's good or bad. Probably some of it's good, some of it's bad, But it's changing. And it's not going to unchange. And no laws in Texas or Arkansas or wherever else you might pick is going to change that. Because the population is becoming more colorful. It is becoming more eclectic. And that's just not going to change. It is what it is. So, that's my political statement for the day. Awkward Penguin, everything is rigged, he said, so they believed him. Yeah, but, I mean, I don't know if you were watching at the start, Awkward Penguin, but if you look at what happened over the last 2 days with Larry Elder, it's just beyond the pale. It's beyond the pale. Just so you guys know what I'm talking about, I'll just show this, and then you can choose to either look at it or not. Okay? So what I'm doing is I'm looking at my YouTube history, and I'm going to pull up this video. This is what got me started with it. Actually, you know what? I'll just play the audio. So this is Rachel Maddow. So if you hate Rachel Maddow or you think you can't believe anything she says, that's fine. But this is the story, because I went and I confirmed this story through many, many sources. Okay? So I'm just going to play the audio. No, well, I'm going to stand by my statement, Tom, because I'm saying it started with Reagan. You can talk about Nixon. Certainly, Clinton and Obama in another age would have been Republicans anyway. Especially Obama. And so no, you're correct. Clearly, you're correct. But I'm going to play the audio and just shut up for a minute. You guys can hear the story, okay? Because again, I confirmed this with many sources, and then I went to the right-wing media to see how they were going to debunk it and or discredit it. And what I found was dead silence. So here's the story. I'll let you hear this. This is Rachel Maddow from 2 nights ago.
It turns out we can leapfrog magically into the future 26 hours tonight at this website. It is the campaign website for the main Republican challenger trying to unseat California's Democratic governor, Gavin Newsom. That election, in which California voters will decide whether or not they want to recall Governor Newsom, that election is tomorrow. Polls close at 8 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow, which is 11 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. But if you want to see what that future is like, go to that campaign website, the top Republican trying to unseat Governor Newsom, and just click there at the top where it says Stop Fraud. You click on the Stop Fraud tab and look. Turns out this dude has already lost. Gavin Newsom has already won. It's the future. We can see the future. The election hasn't even happened yet, but the Republicans are already very, very mad that they lost the California recall election, and they are already claiming they only lost it because of all the fraud they saw on Election Day, which in real life hasn't happened yet. But look, they live in the future. And so they're able to say this, quote, "We implore you to join us in this fight as you are able, primarily by signing our petition demanding a special session of the California legislature to investigate and ameliorate the twisted results of this 2021 recall election of Governor Gavin Newsom." What twisted results? There aren't any results, twisty or untwisty. The election is tomorrow. But this Republican time machine is a powerful thing. They say, quote, "Statistical analyses used to detect fraud in elections held in third world nations, such as Russia, Venezuela, and Iran, have detected fraud in California, resulting in Governor Gavin Newsom being reinstated as governor." Again, this is what they've got live on Larry Elder's website tonight. The election hasn't happened yet. Governor Gavin Newsom hasn't been reinstated as governor or recalled as governor or anything else. The election hasn't happened. It's tomorrow. But already, the Republicans' top candidate to replace Newsom says he has lost the election. Newsom is not being recalled, and it's because of all the fraud they know happened. That they statistically analyzed like Iran. And so they know it happened. They know it happened tomorrow, even though tomorrow is technically in the future. But, oh, by the way, if you do not believe them, if you do not take these claims of theirs very, very seriously, they also want you to know, the top Republican candidate for governor in California also wants you to know that there's a pretty good chance that if you don't go along with this, if you don't believe it, if you resist, there's going to be some shooting. Here is the opening salvo on that part of the website for Larry Elder, the Republican candidate for governor in California. Quote, "They say that in America there are 4 boxes of liberty: the soap box, the ballot box, the jury box, and the ammo box. We trust in our elected officials to safeguard the ballot box. However, when those officials, either through laziness or incompetence, allow thieves to steal amidst the dead of night and cheat our ballot box," what is this translated from? Quote, "we can no longer rely on its contents. Will we now have to fight the California jury box in the hope that the final box, the one most akin to Pandora's, remains closed?" Remember, in this setup, the final box is the ammo box. In other words, this is Republicans proclaiming, saying basically, join us in proclaiming in advance that any election won by a Democrat doesn't count, or we will turn to the ammunition box to get our way. We will turn to the ammo box. And that's not like a random, screenshot from YouTube comments on some bug-eyed video about how you should pull your, take your dog's flea collar off him and put it in your underpants to protect yourself against COVID, right? This isn't just like some crazy town snapshot of weird right-wing paranoia. This is up on the website right now of the Republicans' leading candidate to try to recall the governor of California. And you should leave your dog's flea collar exactly where it is while we're on the subject. But look, even specifically on that page with the, ammo box threat and all the rest of it, it says right there at the bottom, paid for by Larry Elder Ballot Measure Committee, Recall Newsom Committee. Major funding from Larry Elder for governor 2021. Even before the election happens tomorrow, they are telling you tonight, not only that they don't accept the future election results, but also that they expect Republican voters in California to do the same and to join with them so as to avoid a shooting war. It has become an article of faith and a central organizing principle of Republican campaigning now in 2021 that elections themselves are not something we should do anymore. Election results are not real. Only suckers believe in the vote count at the end of an election. Only suckers believe in the proclamation of a winner. Republicans don't believe those things.
Now, that's not
we're
completely
here.
fair because not all Republicans don't believe those things, obviously. So, but yeah, pretty crazy what Elder did. And as I said, I checked the website the next day, and of course that was taken down and replaced with a thing you could sign and fill out in case you saw some fraud and you wanted to report it, kind of thing. And then today, quite interestingly, now that Elder actually lost his bid to unseat Gavin Newsom in California, now that it actually has happened, the whole tab on his website about stopping fraud is gone. So here's what I think happened with Larry Elder. After this debacle, I think that he had a wakey moment and realized that distancing himself from the "we see fraud everywhere" strategy for winning elections, distancing himself from that is probably the pathway he needs to follow if he wants to have a snowball's chance in hell of ever actually achieving political office at this point. So this was a fairly damaging thing. A damaging boo-boo. But there you go. Yep. So, and I again, it's Spider. If someone would rather have Elder as governor than Newsom, that's perfectly fine. I have no problem with that. That's all just opinion. Everybody has a right to their political stripe, whatever size or shape or color it may be. I think we all have a place. That's why I'm a centrist. I think there's stupidity and there's good ideas on both sides of the aisle. I really do. Now, on analysis, I tend to certainly lean left at this point in my life. That is a fact. But I don't do so with, I don't think I do it naively. I think it's usually reasonably well thought out. There's let me share this insight about it. What you find, the pattern I've noticed is, and both sides do it, okay, but I see it more on the right in recent history, is that when you talk about the virtues of your political philosophy, in other words, conservatism has a tendency to argue from the vantage point of a compelling future. In other words, if we enact this particular policy, this is the wonderful, usually economic, benefit that we will that will accrue. And conversely, if we pursue this frightening socialist progressive policy, this is the terrible, awful state of the country. Like Donald Trump said, you know, you're not even going to have a country. Okay, so what I hear is conservatives arguing always from a vantage point of a future that's either frightening or compelling. Okay, as opposed to a pragmatic assessment of the data at hand, taking all views into account in order to arrive at a reasonable policy that generally is not going to satisfy anyone, but it's going to be perhaps reasonably acceptable to everyone. And that's what being a centrist it really is you simply recognize the fact that that's the only way you ever get anything done anyway. It's the only way you get anything done, is you find the middle ground that basically leaves everyone a little bit unhappy. I have a problem with a political philosophy that finds itself compelled to argue from the vantage point of a theoretical, compelling or frightening future. Why? Because the whole reason you do that is your political philosophy is in fact a religion. It's a philosophical story that sometimes works. Sometimes it works, but doesn't necessarily. In order to keep your in order to keep the articulation of your political philosophy sufficiently simple so that we stupid hoi polloi can even understand it and follow it, you have to keep it really simple. And the simplest thing to do, obviously, is to simply demonize your opponent. Therefore, any progressive policy is going to be labeled socialist. It doesn't mean that it's not a socialist policy. It could be. But they understand that when they use that language, that term, socialism, that invokes a fear response in you. And so you have this linguistic shorthand that allows them to get you on board with their position that may be equally, poorly conceived. So manifestly, this is about power. It's truly about the retention of power. The gaining of power and the retention of power. And again, I'll say it again, nothing wrong with seeking power. There's a lot of people on the right and the left who very sincerely have passionate beliefs about what either will help or harm our country going forward. I get it. But when you see things like what Larry Elder did, where it's obvious the duplicity and the abuse, frankly, of you as his supporter, the contempt he obviously has for you because he obviously thinks you're really, really stupid. I have a problem with treating people that way. I really do. My contention is that actually you're probably pretty smart. And that your opinion matters. This is going to be a little tricky here. It's okay. Hey, baby. My beautiful princess just walked by. So it isn't very often that we get a situation like we had over the last 2 days where we have this explicit, again, indefensible example of that type of abuse, that Larry Elder foisted on his followers. So I find it quite satisfying when that happens because, whether Larry is on the right or the left, I still don't like the idea that he's treating his most ardent supporters as a bunch of suckers that he's prepared in advance to give them this story because, and I mean, this is the party of patriots, right? Larry Elder would never do that. He's a patriot. Well, the word patriot is just like the word socialism. It's just a word that's been co-opted in the socio-political conversation space in order to serve as a shorthand so that we don't actually have to deal in good faith with people who disagree with us and who may be very well informed and may have very good ideas. We don't want to do that. It really suggests that a lot of the guys that are out there running for office are really probably not the kind of people you want running your country. Not just because of this moral issue of how they will abuse you if they could get away with it, but because, frankly, they're not that smart. You know? Obviously, anybody who would allow that to get on his website, I mean, that's a great example of how much of an idiot can you be? And if you're going to do the sneaky play, at least do it right. It's like comically silly. But, it happened. Control C, Control V. So I'm happy that I'm able to ramble about these things and still keep getting the work done here. So, okay, I'm going to go up here, and what you're saying right now is exactly the same on both sides currently. You can't even split it to one or the other. Well, if you're strongly on one side or the other, then I believe you're going to... Okay, if you're strongly on one side or the other, and there's a strong case being made for the other side, then what I expect you to say in the socio-political conversation right now is what you just said, is, well, yeah, but the other side's just as bad. You're always going to come back to that. Why? Because, again, the same thing with Elder, you can't defend what actually happened. And again, now we're back to political philosophy. We're back to shorthand language that summarizes up the whole situation in one sentence, which means you don't actually have to deal. Honestly, I'm not accusing you of this, Tom, but I'm saying this is what you see people doing all the time. Is now we don't have to. In other words, if you're a right winger, you should say, since you're a patriot and you love your country and you love truth and you don't want tyranny, then what you should be saying is, oh my gosh, what Larry Elder did is absolutely outrageous, and I completely disavow any support for that guy that I ever may have expressed in the past. He's clearly a shyster. That's what you should be saying. And then once you've said it, go back to your political philosophy and we all move forward. But this is the thing that we don't hear anybody on the right saying. Why? Because this is all a political calculus. It always was. It has been for the last year. And that's all it will be for some time in the future. Until you have more events like what Larry Elder did, where it becomes so obvious that the people that are on the right side of the aisle who have been really drinking the Kool-Aid, not all of them have, but some have, start to wake up and go, you know, maybe I am being played for a sucker here. Maybe it's really actually true. Maybe I actually believe a lot of stuff that's being fed to me because it is expedient for someone to have me believe it. Folks, wake the hell up. Of course that's what goes on. And again, perfectly understandable. I made a mistake here. Yeah, I got a problem. We got to take this and this right here. Okay, so here's how we're going to handle this. We're going to take this, basically from everything from here, Control C. And that's because even my conservative friends, I care about my conservative friends. I don't want them to be played for a sucker. I don't want them to believe something that's stupid, that's obviously being foisted on them because it's going to benefit someone politically for them to buy into it. I understand the whole socio-cultural and oftentimes religious backdrop behind it that causes them to desperately want to believe it. I understand that, and I feel for them. The country is changing, and it's not going to stop changing. And it is scary for people who have been convinced that their way of life is going to be eroded. I hold that they're being told their way of life is going to be eroded again because it's politically expedient for somebody to get them to believe that. In point of fact, things are changing for everybody. Hell, there's plenty of signs in the economy right now that, I mean, seriously, there are good data points going on in the economy right now that say, if not this year, but probably by next year, we are going to enter a depression. At the very least, a strong recession. And if you're like me, you'd say, actually, that's not necessarily a horrible thing. Because the fact of the matter is that a major, major correction is way overdue. It's way overdue. You know, and I say that as a guy that's, you know, not looking forward to it, because I do have some money in the market that is going to, I'm probably going to have to cash it out and just sit tight, you know, on the sidelines for a bit. Whoops. That's not what I meant to do right there. You know, so there's, you know, things are changing. It's a fluid world we live in, and oh, come on, Dave. I'm being stupid. I gotta go over here. The good news is this. If we do deal with each other in good faith and quit calling each other names and calling each other socialists and idiots, which of course I've been prone to do from time to time, I think that I actually, you know, the thing that I think is interesting about it is the right has held claim to this idea of, and it leads to certain policies economically that say that we should be able to we're Americans. We can pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. So they overlook a lot of things socioculturally that have happened and politically and legally over many, many years that have been exclusive of people of color or whatever. Okay? Not saying that's the most important prevailing factor, but it is a factor. Okay? But my point is that the right has held claim to this idea that we're the party that believes we believe in you. Okay? We believe that you don't need government help. Why? Well, because this is America. You can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Anybody can succeed in America. So they say they're the party that believes in you. The truth is they don't believe in you. I'm the one who believes in you. I'm the one who believes that you're smart and that if we put our heads together, we can probably solve problems by giving a little bit of credence to everybody's point of view and feelings about the policies that we're considering and acting. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to go look. I'm going to take a minute now and I'm going to look at the chat because I've been ignoring it here for quite a bit. So specification sheets, each uses the same techniques, just a different implementation. I'm not sure what that one's about. You can have two Christians that follow the same religion but celebrate or view things as my God. Unfortunately, most people don't follow a religion, don't really understand, just like a party, what the real purpose is of that vehicle. I agree completely. I agree completely. Nothing wrong with being spiritual, nothing wrong with practicing a religion, but don't be naive about who benefits from you necessarily playing along with the maxims and the mores of that particular ism. Because the reality is that belief systems that are presented to you as something you should accept, and the reason you should accept it, again, from the standpoint of a compelling future or a scary future. Compelling future is if we go with our policies, everything's going to be so wonderful. You know, it's going to create jobs. You know, that's always a good line. Okay, but if we don't, we're going to be moving in a socialist direction. We're going to be just like communist China or, you know, whatever. So the whole idea is to tease you with a benefit, and the benefit is never today. It's always in the future, and tease you and scare you with a threat. There's a gremlin at the door that's going to get you if we go the other way. And by the way, if you accept this story that I'm telling you, you're going to vote for me, and I'm going to be the one who really doesn't have to worry about the future like you do, because, you know, I'm in a position of power, and there's all kinds of opportunity and money and all kinds of wonderful things that go with that. So the only real ism people need to stop and maybe things will be better is stupidism. It's a game versus player situation. Okay, Tom, what are you saying here? The game is why you can't separate the two sides. The lying and manipulation is how they play. Well, that's right, and it's what you see in the media space. Obviously, if you're going to be a talking head on whatever news channel, take your pick, right or left, doesn't matter. If you only got 40 seconds to make your point, we're not going to come to a reasoned discussion and exploration of the ups, downs, and pros and cons, and we're certainly not going to have any chance, like we would in a court of law, by the way, to cross-examine and fact-check you, okay? So you can say whatever the hell you want, And what's going to happen is exactly what we see happening all the time, which is the people who are already predisposed to believe you in the first place are affirmed, okay? I'm seeing something here on the live stream that looks to me like it's buffering. I am a little concerned. It seems to me that we're buffering. Are you guys seeing buffering? You say conservatives think of the future. I think the conservative philosophy is... Okay, so a great example of conservative for Spider. And I agree about voter IDs. I mean, being able to identify yourself and all the rest, those are all good things. You know, yeah, I know. This is the first buffering I've seen in a long, long time. Okay. So I'm not sure about the buffering because I'm not doing the big upload, the 120 gig upload I was doing yesterday. And yet here I get the first buffering I've gotten in weeks ever since I upgraded my internet. So yeah, maybe I'm being monitored for quality purposes. Anyway, here's an example, a concrete example of what I'm talking about. We saw it in big oil. We saw it in the internet space. We saw it in telecom. Okay, so the basic idea is this. The right, and this goes back to the 1980s, the right is going to tell you, based on a compelling future and a scary future, is that if we deregulate, that is going to open up the playing field to lots and lots of competition, and we're going to get all kinds of economic benefit and create jobs, and more competitors can get in the game if we deregulate. We got to get rid of regulation, okay? So we're gonna decry countries like the Nordic countries where they have higher taxes. That's horrible. Of course, they're socialists, you know, blah blah blah, and we're gonna give you this theoretical philosophical position that says if we deregulate, it'll lead to this wide playing field of free competition. Wonderful. It was basically the thinking behind NAFTA as well when we opened up to, you know, Mexico and Canada. Okay? That's the theory. Well, we have a wonderful opportunity here to look back and see historically, well, how did that work for you? How did it actually turn out? Well, what we see is typically when you take an industry and deregulate it, what does it actually lead to? What it leads to typically is oligarchy, where the 2 or 3 biggest players who are now liberated by deregulation are able to gobble up or crush all the other competitors, and you wind up with an industry that's dominated by 2 or 3 really, really massive players. And so the story you were told about how it's going to lead to all this free competition turns out to have been wrong. It may have turned out to be a lie, but it definitely turns out to have been wrong. And it turns out that way most of the time. And this is a key tenet of conservative economic philosophy. Right? It's not that removing barriers to competition is a bad thing. It's not. But deregulation in the form that it was presented to us by conservatives, going back again to the 80s, which, by the way, manifestly was going to benefit, in many cases, themselves economically. Nothing wrong with that, okay? Nothing wrong with that. But, you know, there might be a little motivation here to tell the story the way you're telling it. So anytime we can have a... See, so what happened with the presidential election and what happened even more explicitly over the last 3 days with Larry Elder is we had the opportunity to actually look back and say, you know what? I don't have to believe your story about the future or the past. I don't have to believe your story because I can look at the data and I can see what actually took place. I can actually see the history. And it's not really debatable. When we have the opportunity to do that, that's a really, really cool thing. And we should learn from it. Okay, so I think we're good. I'm going to re-render here and then jump over to the show and kind of see how things are looking. Yeah, and my comment about thinking of the future is that what I find is conservative philosophy is typically, I'll state it this way. Conservative philosophy typically presents its principles to you from a vantage point that is about convincing you of both a compelling future and a scary future. The scary future is what happens if we go with the progressive policy. The compelling future is what happens if we go with the conservative philosophy. They tend to speak from a theoretical vantage point instead of a practical, pragmatic, well, what are we dealing with right now in this specific situation? That's why laws and regulation and politics usually are best implemented, for the most part, as locally as possible, so that the people that are affected by the policy actually have a voice in creating the policy. I generally find that's what works best. So I'm big on states' rights. I don't like what's going on in Texas, but I do respect their right to do whatever the heck they want to do. You know? Not so much in regard to like COVID. That's a little messier because you've got people going from state to state, but let's see what we have here. Okay. Conservatives think of the future. I don't think I said think. I said they present their philosophy from a vantage point that fixates on the future instead of the present. And the reason for that is really obvious, and it's because of what I said about oligarchy. Okay? If you know historically that when we deregulate an industry, it usually leads to an oligarchy within just a very few years, then you can't talk about deregulation from a factual vantage point. You have to talk about it from the theoretical vantage point. And the theoretical vantage point remains that if we deregulate, it opens everything up to competition so more people can compete. You know, that's always good for the market, good for prices, good for jobs. Everybody wins. You have to hold fast to that theoretical position, even though the history has shown us over and over again it actually doesn't work in practice. There are things about conservative economic philosophy that are perfectly wonderful and fine. I'm just giving this as one example where it blatantly fails, but they're never going to just come out and say, yeah, you know, actually that doesn't work out very well. You know? Okay, Norway has a nice nation-owned oil business and a fund that's shared across the population. And that's a great thing you're bringing up, Tom, because what we see is I think that things like, you know, obviously employee-owned companies and things like that, where again, as locally as possible, the people who are affected by policies have a hand in forming those policies. It's usually a good thing. Usually a good thing. So what is that saying? Is that this party is the only party thinking of the future, and they're not? Yeah, everybody's fixated on the idea that I'm saying progressives aren't. I shouldn't have said future. I should have said theoretical. Okay? In other words, everybody's got a political philosophy, and I think that progressive philosophy today is generally grounded in present reality better than conservative philosophy. That's my opinion. And so, because it's not grounded in present realities, a conservative philosophical approach to problem solving tends to fixate on a theoretical outcome that often can be shown to not actually work in practice. That's all I'm saying. Again, if you want real change, you have to be that change. Okay. I am. I'm on YouTube live streaming and I'm talking about it. So I guess that's about as good as I can do at this point. Line them up side by side. As I write, data processing is easier and more accessible every year as technology advances. True enough. Compare the proposed strategies with historical outcomes. Right. Well, that's right. And I gave one example. I agree. You would want to look at all of the different policies, and you would want to that's exactly what I'm saying, is that we don't typically embrace good quality data analysis in formulating policies going forward. What we have the tendency to do is cling to the theory of how things should work. Okay? And that makes perfect sense, because in the political arena, when we seize upon theoretical approaches, we can A, keep it simple, B, scare the hell out of you by telling you all the bad things that are going to happen if we don't get our way. I mean, it's just way simpler for everybody. Right? So, and then again, liberals do the same thing. I'm not saying they don't. I'm saying in my observation over many, many years, there tends to be a more fixation on the theoretical coming from the conservative side, which is why it tends not to work for me a lot of ways, especially economically. The reason why, Dave, is because that foundational issue of small federal government. Yeah, I mean, we're not going to be able to. I mean, the reality of the way our money system works and whatnot, it's not going to change. You know, it really is not going to change. Being completely equal will never happen. And again, I certainly never said anything about equality, especially if you're going to. It would be not unusual, I would say, for a conservative to lambaste a liberal on the basis that what they want is equality of outcomes. Um, when probably oftentimes what they really do want is equality of opportunity, and they're objecting to the fact that the theoretical equality of opportunity doesn't exist to the degree that they think it should. And then it might be that you say, yeah, more equality of outcomes might be a good thing. Might be a good thing to a degree. But actual equality of outcomes, literally, no. That's stupid. That's never going to happen. The way to think of it is this. What if you had a $10 million budget, and that budget, this was your entire government situation. It's your budget, and it's your neighborhood. Okay? And I'm not going to answer the question. I'm going to say, okay, it's your neighborhood. There's a $10 million budget to govern your neighborhood. So all the business development, all the hiring, your minimum wage policy, this all comes from you and affects you very, very directly. Now, if you begin to follow the money and look at the incentives that tend to happen, what happens is when you think about it, you will start to move away from the theoretical and toward the practical, because you're thinking about what would I do in that situation. Okay? That's a useful way to think about these things. So spiders involved very locally heavily. I want my area to be the best I can be. That's great. That's fantastic. Things can be equal. To say never is absolution if you believe that. Well, it's not. I mean, it's manifestly not. And go back to my neighborhood example. Okay? So if we go into our neighborhood and we say, well, we're going to start with a really progressive policy, so everybody in the neighborhood gets $50,000 this year. Everybody gets the same income, let's say, theoretically. Okay, because some progressives are big on like a universal basic income. The practical implementation of a universal basic income is not that simple. Why? Because you're only going to give the universal basic income to the people who actually need it. Okay, usually. But maybe not necessarily. That's where we're getting into a difference between, well, wait a minute, if you're going to give my neighbor $50,000, I should get it too, even if I already make them $100,000, right? So now there's all kinds of arguments we have to have about how the policy is implemented. But let's just say, for simplicity, we start this way. Okay, so this is for AMAR, I'm saying this. Everybody in the neighborhood gets $50,000, that's it. Or $100,000, doesn't matter what the number is. Okay, the question you need to ask yourself is, 5 years from now, are they still all going to have the same level of income and wealth? Come on. Clearly, no. Clearly, some people are going to opportunistically say, wow, this is great. I can be a lazy ass and watch TV all day and collect my $50,000. In fact, if I'm not wrong, history has shown in countries and places where there have been really aggressive welfare programs, what you find, that's one of the things you're supposed to be afraid of. If you're conservative, you want to be really afraid that if we implement a welfare program, everybody's just going to quit working and just enjoy the windfall. Well, what actually happens in real people is real people actually don't want to just sit around and watch TV all day. And what actually happens is about 5 to 10% of your population will kind of live on the dole, and the rest of them won't. That's what actually happens. And that happens no matter what. You're always going to get about, I think it's about 5% of the people will take the welfare and just, that's it. And that's held true. Again, you can check me if you want, but I believe this has held true across many countries and many populations and many different kinds of welfare programs. That's what you find is about 5% of the people are lazy asses who want to live on the dole. Okay, nothing's ever going to change that, right? Okay, so progressive reality. If this life is contained within me, I can stop its heartbeat, no problem. My body, my choice. But you also get this vaccine, your body, my choice. Well, we're back to the vaccine now. And the parallel you draw between, a woman's right to an abortion and the vaccine it's an apt parallel that is worth looking at for sure. As long as people in power and people under them, it's not going to happen. I've been saying, Tom, it all depends on who has the real power. If you have the power, you can be that change. Well, yeah, but Amar, you're still. This is why I gave you the example of what happens when you do the universal basic income, right? Within 5 years, there's going to be one guy in the neighborhood who's wealthier than all the rest. It just is what's going to happen. And it always is what's happened. Now, you can mitigate it to a degree with your tax policy. And if you did the universal basic income in your neighborhood, then you would, I am really sure, you would enact a tax policy. And it probably would be a progressive tax policy. Okay? And the richer guy in the neighborhood wouldn't like it. But at some point, what would happen in the neighborhood is, I would hope, unless this is the problem with international economics and mobility, is that people can actually leave the country, and take their money with them to a degree. Correct. So yeah, you've got to have a tax policy if you're going to have an income policy. So if a natural resource like Norway with labor to mine it is shared among the population, I think that's part of the solution to the problems we're talking about. Is the sharing mechanism cannot be 100% egalitarian, but there are sharing policies and tax policies and welfare policies that, taken together as a group of policies working together, can work okay. And I think the Nordic countries are doing pretty well in that regard. It does suck that they have to pay more taxes. Got it. It's okay. When less manual labor is required to grow food. Well, okay, so you're actually bringing up something really, really important. The encroaching technology, along with COVID, kind of brought this into bold relief to a degree. I'm checking my colors here. Sorry I was on this screen for so long. I've been blabbing so much I didn't even realize, but it's not like I've been getting anything done. Okay. And now Amar, come on. If I had a business that made trillions of dollars, I would end poverty, and I'd do this and I'd do that. I challenged you on that the other day, and I still challenge you on it. You said earlier, okay, so Amar, I know you're progressive, and I lean that way myself, but I'm going to challenge you on this. You said in an earlier chat comment today, you said, be the change. And now you're saying if I had $1 trillion, I'd do all this wonderful stuff. And what I said the other day was this. I said, Amar, if you're going to do it now. And it's true about everything, okay? If you're going to be the change, if that's what you really believe, do it now. Because if you really believe that being the change is the key to a more compelling future for all of us, then you believe that it's worth the sacrifice. So you say, well, I don't make enough money. I don't make trillions of dollars. No. If you believe you can be the change, then be the change now. Are you giving 10% of your income to charity in some form? Yes or no? If you're not, then you're not being the change. So you are actually a progressive doing what I'm accusing conservatives of. You're speaking from a vantage point of a theoretical future that we both know is never going to happen. Because you're not going to have the $1 trillion. You're going to have what you have now. And maybe improve a little bit. That's reality. So my suggestion to somebody on the right or the left who's operating from a vantage point of a theoretical future, wake the hell up and deal with reality. And if you're going to talk to people about being the change, then be the change. That's what I say. And I don't say that as a liberal or conservative. I say that as a guy who's creating a 24-minute cartoon. Why? Because I can. And probably to most of the people that will ever see my channel, I could end that sentence by saying, and you're not. And then you're going to give me all kinds of excuses why you're not. Sorry, you're not. It's that simple. You can either be the change and change something about that today or not. And guess what? I respect your choice. I don't really care. Because I'm going to be honest about this. The truth is you don't care that much about me, and I don't care that much about you. That's what people do. We're mostly concerned about ourselves. That's actually a good thing. Largely. Right? Hierarchy is reality. Exactly. That's right. But here's the thing. This is why the moral aspect of it matters. The moral aspect matters. Because if you're going to accept the reality of hierarchy, then we have a wonderful opportunity to bring some ethics to the equation. One of the reasons I lean progressive nowadays is because I think that conservatism still lays claim to ethics vis-a-vis it's alignment with evangelical Christians. In other words, the Republicans are tending to use religion as a basis for a system of ethics that supports a philosophy that's largely theoretical. Yet, in the economic space, they have largely forgotten their ethics. They don't care about abuses if there are profits. It's okay to have profits. It's not okay to be abusive. And admittedly, there's always going to be somebody who's going to claim abuse in a situation that's actually not that abusive. There's always going to be abuses claiming abuse. You know, because people are selfish and are just looking out for themselves. But that's perfectly natural. And we expect that. Okay? So the middle ground is I have to get nose to nose with Tom and I have to ask him a question. Or Amar. I have to go nose to nose with you and I have to say, what do you want, dude? Okay? What do you want? Just tell me what you want. Okay, can I help with that? Okay, I'll help. Or maybe I don't want to help. What you want, I don't think I believe in that. So I don't want to help you. Okay? But we've got to get nose to nose with each other. That's why policies implemented locally tend to be better. You know? Everybody's not sitting around bitching about their fire department. Okay? They're not. They're complaining about the federal government that is implementing policies over which they have no control. It's the lack of control that's the problem. It's the sense of powerlessness. Am I wrong? That's what people get all upset about. Now, you can talk about the individual policies. Good, bad, right, wrong. But what's driving people is their sense of being detached from it. You know, and so we talk about the hypocrisy of politicians and, you know, all the different things about it that bother us. Makes sense. Of course, those things bother us. What Larry Elder did on his website bothers me because the man obviously has no ethics. And he's a right-wing radio personality who talks all the time, I guarantee you, about patriotism and you know, Americanism. I'm sure he does. And yet we know, we have evidence right in front of us from the last 2 days to say this guy is an opportunistic liar. It's who he is. Doesn't that bother you if you're conservative? If you've bet on this guy, if you like this guy, if you've supported this guy, and you find out that he thinks you're just a sucker, and you're just a step on the stairway to his power base, doesn't that bug you a little bit? If it doesn't, what the hell is wrong with you? You know? I'm just like, really? And yet, that's what we see right now. I mean, I'm not joking. That's what I'm seeing is everybody's being silent about it on the right. Why? Obvious reason. It's indefensible. You can't defend it. You can't explain it away. You're not going to get away with lying about it. So what do? You just quit talking. You know? And that's what we call Americanism. That's what we call integrity. That's what we call our ethics here in this country. That's what we're about. Come on. It's ridiculous. Comically ridiculous. Tragically ridiculous. Grow the hell up, people, you know? Why? I tell you why. It's like it goes back to the election. When the election happened, I said, as a progressive, I said, you know what? If there was fraud, I want Donald Trump to be president. If he won, I want him to win. I don't have a problem with him being the president. I don't have a problem winning. I don't like the guy that much, but I don't have a problem with him winning the election. So don't think I would embrace fraud if it meant my guy won, because I wouldn't. My ethics are a little better than that, I think. The evidence wasn't there. It was a story. It was the same thing Larry Elder did just yesterday. It was a lie to shore up a misguided belief system for somebody who benefited directly from you believing it. That's all it was. It's all it ever was. And history is going to show us that that was the case. Why do we want to be so naive? We want to be so naive because we're scared. We're scared of a future that is going to somehow cause us to be harmed or displaced. And when we're scared, we're willing to believe the lie. I get it. I empathize with the people who are scared. Because, as I said earlier, it's true. The country is changing. It is becoming more colorful. And nothing's going to change that. Because the simple law of large numbers is taking over because the people of color are having more babies. They just are. And it's been that way for a bit. So, okay, right-wing socialism, wokeism, socialism. Okay, so Tom gave us a litany of hot-button terms. Okay, it also bugs me how the current administration has lied, but progressives don't call them out. Yeah, anytime anybody lies and they don't get called out on it is going to be bothersome to me. Capitalism and socialism have been a part along with the other isms, blah, blah, blah. If you really look, you can find forms of all of them throughout history. Definitely, that's true. Voting on issues versus personalities would be progress. I agree, Tom. Like a successful business, you hire the manager primarily to get the job done, not to celebrate their views and opinions. Yep, I agree. You know, and that might be my sin today, is focusing on theories and ideas rather than just getting the work done. You know, so I'll take that criticism. Arizona is proving there was fraud, though. Yeah, Spider, and Spider feels that way from the vantage point that the country is going to hell in a handbasket, which of course doesn't say anything. What Spider just said nothing. Okay, Spider, you just said nothing. Country going to hell in a handbasket doesn't say anything, doesn't mean anything. It's just an emotional outburst. Okay? So you think the country is going to hell in a handbasket. Okay, that's your opinion. And so then, okay, so let me just follow. Let me follow the rabbit trail. How my mind processes what you just said. Okay, everybody, hang on a second because I can't keep up with the comment. All right, Spider said two things in a row. First, he said Arizona's proving there was fraud, and then he said, "I'm not scared. I'm pissed. Our country's going to hell in a handbasket." And he also asserts now, "I've got plenty to back it up." Okay, everybody, believe me, everybody I know who was really excited about all the victories Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell were going to have in court, those people felt just like you do, Spider. But let me just follow this through. Okay, so what you just said is, I have this strong. What you just really said is, boy, I'm really, really scared. I'm really, really emotional about the direction my country's going. I can't be specific about it though. Just hell in a handbasket. Okay, so boy, it's just awful. It's just terrible. Terrible what's going on. Okay, so if I was going to believe that point of view, then I'd be like, oh man, okay, all right, okay, Spider, I'm scared too. Okay, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Okay, tell me, Spider, go ahead. Get out of the theoretical, get out of the emotional, and just answer the question. Tell me what's going to happen. What's the horrible, bad thing that I should be scared of right now? Come on. You said the comments. You're not scared, you're pissed. Okay, what should I be pissed about? What's the bad thing that I should be really, really concerned about right now? And then tell me what would be the fix. If Donald Trump was still president, maybe? I don't know if that's where you're at, but is that right? Coming from a former LEO, most of my family's active military, I'll respond to all of it. Okay, go ahead. Guys, let's not chat for a minute, and let's let Spider take as many comments as he wants to say whatever he wants to say. This is really important, gang. This man wants to be heard. Okay, Tom, Amar, let Spider have the floor. And Spider, if you want to send 20 messages, do it. Tell me what you're worried about. I think you deserve to be heard. So go. You got the floor, buddy. And then if there are a lot of comments, then what I'll do, I would suggest at the end say, okay, I'm done now, or something to that effect. Okay? So just hold up for a bit, Tom. Okay? Spider's a military guy. Okay? He's a conservative guy, it sounds like. Probably a Republican kind of guy. He tells us the country's going to hell in a handbasket. He's really concerned. Okay, well, I'm going to say this. If my friend is really, really that concerned, then I want to back the hell off, and I want to hear what he has to say. I want to give him a chance. So go. Okay, we're nearly energy independent, almost 90%. Almost 90%. Okay, 5% of our imports were from Canada and Mexico. Now we're buying billions from Saudi Arabia and Russia. Okay. So concern number one is that we were achieving energy independence, I assume you would say under Trump, and now we're giving that back. Okay? Is that about right? So energy independence is an issue for Spider. Perfectly legit. It is an issue. I don't have a strong opinion about it. So, my perspective right now is I'm here to learn. I am here to learn. I've been sharing my opinions for a while. Okay, Biden is begging OPEC for more oil, which is funding the top two countries that hate America with a passion. Okay. So you're not whippy on Biden's foreign policy. And you have very specific concerns about that policy. Good stuff. He cut tens of thousands of jobs from America. We left nearly 85 billion in able military equipment overseas for known terrorist organization. Yeah. Got concerns about Afghanistan. A lot of people do. A lot of people do. So, okay, so it looks like Spider might be done. There's not a lot more coming through. So let me ask you this a couple questions now. First of all, let's talk about the energy independence thing. Okay. It would have been my understanding that the march toward energy independence was well underway during the Obama administration. Um, so would you say that that greatly improved under Trump? I'm guessing maybe. And then a question I would have to challenge you would be, what would be your understanding of the opposite argument? In other words, whatever Biden's policies that are harming our energy independence, do you have a sense of what the rationale for that would be? In other words, what do you think is the reason we're going in a different direction? He completely disregarded the Trump plan that was condition-based and just blames Trump for the bad pullout. That poll got one of my brother's friends killed in Afghanistan. Well, see, there you go. I mean, obviously you've been affected personally and directly. Okay, so Obama went up in energy imports. Okay. So there you go. Because I don't have any reason not to, I'm gonna assume your information is good. Okay, so here I made a little boo-boo. Yeah. this actually needed to be a duplicate, so. The Obama administration, even the war with Britain was not a war fought for all Americans. Well, let's stay in the present though, Amar. Let's stay focused on. Let's give Spider his day here. You know, let's stay focused on. Trump cut imports down to under 90,000. Okay. So what would be the? So I am challenging you to a degree to elucidate, if you can, what your understanding would be for the change in policy. In other words, is it a conspiratorial explanation where Obama just wants to sell out to the rest of the world because he's a freaking globalist, or do you think there's actually some? Is there an argument that is there a reasoned argument that you're aware of for the change in policy? Because I think that's something I've said the last few days is, as storytellers, I think that airing our opinions about politics through stories is a great idea because it forces us to get really acquainted with the opposite point of view. Otherwise, you can't tell your story well because you need someone in the story to represent the opposite point of view. It sounds like cherry picking, but you can do that with all presidents. You very well can. Trump wasn't perfect, but he did quite a few good things. And you know what? And I do not like Donald Trump, okay? That's a fact. But I do not disagree with your statement, especially in the foreign policy realm. I am not hardcore critical of Trump. In terms of the policies he pursued as president, I'm not all down on him. I am completely down on his whole approach to the election and the whole fraud thing, and I think the guy is a complete scam artist in that regard. But as a president, that doesn't mean that he didn't do good things as president. I guess that's kind of an unusual position to take, but that's how I feel about it. I think it's good to separate these things out, deal with them, somewhat surgically. So you could be spot on correct about energy independence, but have a completely, opinion that I think is completely wrong, maybe, about the whole election thing. So allowing the Taliban to have more control, dismantling our relationships with our allies. I tell you, I don't know. If we could sit and, it's impossible here because obviously I can take the floor if I want to, but I think if we really picked apart the Afghanistan thing, I suspect we might have a different view because it's kind of weird because it's actually traditionally would be a more conservative view is that why, it's like the idea of, well, why are we trying to be the world's police? And why are we not allowing this country to I don't want to say be what they want to be. That's not quite fair because what they are may be something that's being implemented largely by force against the will of the people. And that's probably true to a degree, and it's probably not true to a degree. Obviously, there are people in Afghanistan that sympathize with the religious and cultural views propagated by a group like the Taliban. Obviously, there's a lot of people in Afghanistan who don't. So this is a big problem. It's no different than the problem we have in the United States between left and right, other than the fact that over there it's a little more violent, right? It helped immigrants to become a citizen quicker. He guaranteed historic black colleges funding with 10 years. That's all he could grant, but by far better than Obama did. Biggest reason why America helps keep the Middle East stable is so the Taliban... Oh, Middle East, right. Middle East stable. So the Taliban and ISIS doesn't spread to our European allies. Okay. Yeah, and I'm not going to try to debate these. Other people can in the chat if they want. If you get one thing from me, it's that I find the it's why I talked about the Larry Elder thing, is I find the dynamics of human psychology and how we respond to all this stuff sociopolitically and the games we play and the lies we tell ourselves. I find all that interesting. Once we start going through on a policy by policy basis, I actually, I'm a bit ashamed to admit, I start getting bored a little bit. But I invite anyone who, and obviously Amar has some opinions, anybody who wants to take issue with Spider's positions, feel free. And I trust Spider respects that because, I gave him the floor and everybody should have a right to say what they feel. I don't care. I'm not threatened by anybody's position, right? I don't find it threatening. In the socio-political conversation, that's kind of the problem a lot of the time, is people find a position or what they think a person's position is going to be. They find it threatening out of hand, and so then they go into defensive mode right away. So, yeah, I got your typo there. It's like calling the poorest people that are fighting to survive while I sit in my fat castle throwing stones at the peasants. Well, what is? It's like calling the poorest people that are fighting to survive while I sit in my fat castle throwing stones at the peasants. Well, as a black person, I haven't seen any benefits any president has done regarding my life for the past 40 plus years. Well, yeah, okay. I can't disagree. If you haven't seen it, you haven't seen it. And all I can say to that is, maybe that just underscores the fact that the source of the help that would be meaningful isn't likely to come from the federal government, which of course a conservative would probably tend to agree with that sentiment, at least in theory. At least in theory. Today's ink day. So, I'm glad people are sticking around, even though I'm going a little political today. The biggest issue is I want smaller government, not anarchists, and people to be able to provide for themselves. I'm always open for discussion. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think that that's what we're probably all after for the most part. I mean, I don't want to see my neighbors suffer, and I don't want to see me suffer, right? So I don't want to have all the money in my pocket taken away and given to my neighbor who maybe I don't respect my neighbor's, maybe I don't feel that my neighbor is deserving of that money, that I earned, kind of thing, right? But maybe to Amar's point, it's kind of like, okay, but what can we do to at least facilitate, in good faith, people's ability to help themselves or achieve or accomplish whatever it is they think they want to do? Sometimes you got to call people out on their shit, on their BS. And to a degree, even though politically Amar and I usually probably agree most of the time, actually. That's kind of what I was doing about the whole $1 trillion thing. So I would say that, in other words, if a person says, well, if I was king or if I had $1 billion, I'd do all these good things. Usually I probably am not going to I'm going to be that's a little dubious for me. And so my point is that, well, the excuse then is going to be, well, no, I can't be the solution now because I'm so disadvantaged in some way. Okay, so life has sucked for me. Life has cheated me. It's the government's fault. And I'm not putting these words in your mouth, Amar, but I'm saying this is kind of the mindset and the argument this is the direction that would lead you. So the reason I can't be the solution now is because I don't have the resources to do so. But the reason I don't have the resources is not my fault. That's where I'm going to take issue with you. If you were honest and the argument went in that direction, I would take issue with it. Because I do believe that for the most part, everything we get in life, especially in America, the truth of the matter is most of us who are in a crappy position got ourselves there for the most part. I think that's a very safe statement. It's not 100%. There are definitely abuses that are systematic, that are institutionalized, that are very egregious, that have affected lots of people. But yet, generally speaking, if you cut through all the BS about the government and all the things we think we should expect, and you go and you start looking at your life minute by minute, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, when you were 22 years old, what were you doing with yourself? What were you doing with your minutes and your hours? What you're probably going to find is wherever you're at in life right now, you got yourself there. Probably. I think, am I wrong? I mean, do you think that in America, am I wrong that that's not actually probably the truth most of the time? Right? And that's what I try to do here in regard to storytelling and animation. And, when I talk about sort of grokking out these creative processes, it is true that there's never been a better time in the history of the world to be a creative person creating all different kinds of media. And so I look at you guys and I go, well, you know what? I don't know if you guys realize this, but you can do it. You can. Maybe you can only give it half an hour a day. And if you say, well, I don't really want to. I mean, I kind of think the animation thing's cool or whatever, but I don't really want to necessarily do this or do that. To which I will say, okay, don't do this and don't do that. It's your choice. I don't care. It's your decision. What a wonderful thing that you get to decide. This is coming together okay. Now we got this lip sync. Well, the lip sync's already in there, so I guess I don't have to worry about the lip sync, do I? Duh. I have a lot of faith in people. I really do. Usually when I think about people I've known, okay, put it this way. I'll give you guys a little true confession here. Okay, because I've worked at home for 30 years. All right. I've been working for myself, basically by myself for 30 years. I've had different employee situations at different times, but basically I've just kind of done my own thing and done just fine, running my own game, my way. In fact, I've got friends that ran businesses that were sort of running parallel to mine, where they made different choices than I did, where they really grew the thing. And I totally respect the growth, but when I look at their lifestyle and what that required from them, basically I don't consider it necessarily that much of a win. Okay, so all of which is to say, I basically run a one-man show for 30 years, okay? So that's the backdrop to the following statement. Over those last 30 years, I've had a lot of people come to me. I mean, I've had plenty of people come to me, friends, whatever, and say to me basically this: God, I wish I could do what you do, Dave. Okay? So I'm like a really, really grateful guy. I love my life. Why? Because I'm doing things kind of my way, and I can because I did earn it. I earned it, starting back in the 90s. I worked very hard doing sales, to build up my business and stuff. So I get these people over the years that they say to me, God, Dave, I wish I could do what you could do. I say, well, okay, get on the phone and sell. Go. Do it. No, I can't do that. I can't do. What? You can't do that? What are you talking about? You can't. Of course you can. Do it. Go. You'll make mistakes. And when things go sideways, talk to me. I'll talk to you about it. I'll give you some pointers. Every single one of those people, 100%, not 90, not 50, 100% of those people over the years who've said to me, oh, God, Dave, I wish I could do what you did. Not one has ever actually done anything with, to achieve that, independence or whatever that they said they wanted. Not one. I cannot think of one example of a person that actually did something about it. It's just like, really? Seriously, dude? That's what you're going to do? I don't get it. I don't freaking get it. You don't wish. You don't. You wish you could have this, whatever it is. Not looking at myself as a wonderful, great example, but I have a lot of independence. Let's put it that way. You don't actually want it if you're not willing to do something about it. If you're not willing to pay a price. If you're not willing to suffer a little bit. You don't want it. You want it if it's easy. That's what you want. You want it if it's easy. And I don't begrudge you that. If you don't want it, you don't want it. That's okay. What do I care? You don't have to have it. Whatever it is. But don't tell me you want it, but you're not willing to pay a price. That's stupid. You're treating me like an idiot now. No. Of course you've got to pay a price. Of course it's hard. That's how the universe tests you. Okay? The universe, and trust me, it doesn't matter what you do. Any business that you start, okay? Had a lot of business enterprises over the years. Trust me. Any business that you start, the universe loves you. The universe loves you, my friend. And so you know what the universe is going to do? The universe is going to make it brutally difficult. So that even at the times when you think, you're going to have some cool breakthroughs and things are going to start going well and it's going to take off, it's not. Nope, it's not what's going to happen. Everything's going to go sideways, and you're going to have setback after setback. You know why? Because the universe loves you. The universe is going to test you to see how really serious and committed you are to whatever it is you say you want. Because the truth of the matter is, in America, it is actually true. This is my more conservative side coming out. The truth is, for the most part, whatever it is you think you want, you probably can have. You probably can. Maybe not, but you probably can. But not without paying the price. Like, what was it? E something, I forget the guy's name, billionaire named Hunt. This is years ago. He said, this is quoting from my Brian Tracy book. He said, all that's required in America is number one, you must decide exactly and precisely what it is you want. You must decide precisely what you want. And then you need to figure out precisely what is the price you must pay to have that. And then here's the kicker. You must resolve to pay that price. Not going to lie to you, folks. Most people are not willing to pay a serious price to make their life better. So again, I'm not talking about abuses. I'm not talking about areas and situations where people are manifestly unjustly deprived of something. That's not what I'm talking about, because that does happen and there's nothing to excuse that, and nor would I ever want to. But the fact of the matter is, when most people talk about the barriers in their life, they're mostly making excuses, is I would say. That's my opinion. Okay, businesses lean on the government as well as politicians. Absolutely. America, the business is the driving factor for corruption. Absolutely agree with that, too. That they do. I agree 1,000% with you. That's why lobbyists and these political PACs should be banned. Spider. So, conservatives want more educated people but are refusing to teach a lot of history. Fair question. Everybody, history gets rewritten by the winner, typically. There's a thing called corporate welfare and bailouts. Absolutely, Amar is correct. It's a huge thing. What history are they refusing? I'm a history buff. I love history. Yes, I believe the corporate welfare and bailouts should be stopped. Dave, in your career, was most of your business within a specific community? No. Oh, no. No. In fact, that's something I never did. I never went to, friends in church, and told them things I did and tried to get their business. No. I never wanted to do that. Nope. I just got on the phone and telemarketed. I have clients all over the country. I have business clients all over the nation. And everything from little mom and pop stores to multinational corporations, actually. And I'm not mega wealthy or anything like that. I'm definitely not. When I talk about crowdfunding this show, there are economic reasons to do that. but I'm okay. I'm doing okay. So, but um, no, no, not at all. The No, when I started, okay, so I mean, I'll get specific. Well, here's what happened. Here's what happened. I worked for a guy in a recording studio, okay, because I was a music guy, right? I was making musical like radio jingles. That was what I wanted to do. So I'm working for my friend Mark, and I worked for him for 3 years. And the studio, Mark was the quintessential salesman, still is, just a wonderful and one of my deepest, bestest friends. He's also a diehard Trumper, actually. So we've got some pretty sharp disagreements politically at this moment in time, but I love him like a brother, and he was absolutely an incredible and influence and a wonderful um, how do I want to say it? Kind of a mentor, you know. I mean, I really learned a lot from him, kind of thing. But anyway, so the studio went under. It almost made it. I mean, I swear, Mark was selling. He was selling like 15 grand worth of sales just to keep the doors open every month just by himself, you know. And this is in the media space, you know. This is audio and video related stuff, and but the studio didn't quite make it. So the studio went under. He had to take in an investor, and basically the investor said, "Hey, I know the way a company can clear another $50,000 this next year." Mark says, "Oh, really? Yeah, cool. How?" And the investor says, "You're fired." Yeah, that really happened. So, okay, what happens here? The eyebrows change, it looks like. No, actually, that's wrong. It looks like here in the drawings, that next drawing there wasn't really needed, but I'm going to change this anyway. I'm going to change his eyebrows. Okay, so we got this situation in like this would be 1980, no, 1991, where I'm thinking I want to be Mr. Musical Jingle guy. I don't want to be Mr. Salesman guy. Okay. So I'm actually going over to Mark's house, and we're just on the phone selling message on hold service. That was one of the things we did in the recording studio. And so we're like, okay, we'll just kind of do that. We'll just focus on that one thing. But I didn't really think I wanted to do sales. So, okay, and by the way, am I completely boring everyone? Amar's talking about the much bigger issues than my stupid little story. So, hey, Enio-san. So if I'm boring everybody to death, I won't. I'll stop the story. If you guys want to hear the story, I'll tell the story. If you don't want to hear the story, I'll skip it. Because frankly, I don't really care. Up to you guys. So let's see here. Oh, you awkward penguins. Okay, so what happened was, while I'm doing this, I'm also looking for a job. So I wind up getting a job with a jingle company that's doing like national jingles, you know. Really cool. It's like, to me, it was like the dream job, you know. So I get this job with this company in Fort Wayne, Indiana, doing radio jingles. I'm like, this is super cool. Well, that experience was the worst work experience of my life, because I loved the job. I loved what I was there to do. But the secret, dirty little truth of the matter was, I really wasn't ready for that job. I oversold my way into that job, and they were correct to fire me, by the way. So they fired me 5 months later. I only lasted 5 months. It was the only sort of corporate climate job where you sort of have the politics and the power structure and all that. It's the only job like that I ever had. Hated it. And the reason I hated it had a lot to do with what you see in the advertising world, okay, all the time, which is that everything has to be done yesterday. Everything's a panic. Every single day, literally every day, there was a reason why today's the day we're going to have to work 14 hours. We're going to have to stay late every day. I mean, it's like every single day. Everything's always a panic. And I always found this to be true in the media space as it relates to advertising specifically. It's why I never went down the road of getting involved with an ad agency or something. Is because for me, it's just a filthy, stupid business. I hate it. Just because it's so wrong-headed. I mean, the truth of the matter is in business, there's very few situations that are actually an emergency where you actually have to drop everything and go into a panic and get it done yesterday. That never happens. But the advertising industry is addicted to that. And it's really prevalent. So I hated the job. Well, I guess it showed. So I was oversold into the job, meaning I really wasn't qualified musically to do. I could do it now without thinking about it. I mean, if I quit doing animation and rebooted my life, one thing I certainly could do is get back into the jingle business, and it's easy. I've done it actually at different times over the last 20 years or so, just for fun. You know, my son and I kind of were selling jingles like 3 summers ago, just for fun, to sort of give him something to do to learn sales. Anyway. So now I'm in Fort Wayne, Indiana, with a baby and a new one on the way, and no job. What do you do? What do you do? What would you do? Anybody want to weigh in? Tell me what you do. Feels like over the pacing, my body temperature is all out of whack. Okay, and by the way, just since we're all giving out our ages, this all happened when I was like 23. So hot and cold all the time. Yeah, that is a little strange. Always crunch mode. Yeah, it sounds like hormonal or whatever. You need to get that checked, brother. You should. You could have a bug for sure. I mean, you know, at our age, every once in a while symptoms show up. Okay? And one thing I have learned is whenever a symptom shows up, give it 2 weeks. Give it 2 weeks. Is it a little better, a little worse, or about the same after 2 weeks? And then then you decide because what I find is it often turns out to be the case that just at the moment where you're like, man, this is a problem, I need to go see the doctor, then all of a sudden it starts getting better. Now, if this is something that's been going on for a while, then yeah, you might want to just get that checked, buddy. Get that checked. Okay, so I'm in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I don't know anybody. I've only been here 5 months, and I got no job. What do you do? Well, I'll tell you what I did. I called up Mark, and I said, dude, you know what? That thing we were doing when you were... That thing we were doing before I got the jingle job, you know, in your basement, I'm going to do that down here. I'm going to do that down here in Fort Wayne. I'll do it down here while you're doing it up there in Michigan, and we'll just compare notes, you know, as time goes by. And that's what we did. We would talk every couple days and just, you know, how the sales were going and blah, 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 blah. And I literally spent... What I actually did was I was selling cable TV. It was actually like a microwave-based satellite, not satellite, but it was like a microwave-based point-to-point TV cable network for rural areas where they don't have cable. It was like 12 channels, you know. It was like a 12-channel system or something. This is back in the early 90s. So I'm selling that door to door just to pay the bills, while I'm trying to make sales calls, you know, and find customers. And I did that for probably 4 months, I think it was. And then something happened. This is the key thing. Something happened around October of 1991. Something changed in me. Seriously, I can't emphasize this enough. Something changed. where I had the moment where you look in the mirror and I say, I am going to succeed. I am absolutely, there's freaking nothing going to stop me. By gum and by God, I'm going to succeed. I will not be dissuaded. There was a definite moment. Within a month, I was popping sales. In fact, I quit the cable TV, the door-to-door selling job. When this fire got lit in me, it was a serious change in my psychology. Okay, so we have a problem. Well, okay, this is one frame, and his hair is bouncing. So I guess we'll probably excuse this. This is a problem right here, where the hairline, because as you can see, the hairline's basically kissing the headband. I think we're okay, though. It almost reads as a squash and stretch moment. So we'll see. It didn't seem to be bothersome in the pencil test, so I'm going to assume that's okay. Okay, so. But yeah, when that fire got lit in me, I just started, I'm just like making calls and I'm setting up meetings and I'm just trying my best. I'm just a kid, I'm just a kid and I'm just determined. I'd get these people would say to me things like, well, how do I know you're even going to be in business in a year? And after a while, I would say back to them, dude, you're the one who's paying me. How do I know you're going to be in business? If I don't make you happy, I'm the one who doesn't get paid. And that seemed to, that type of thing seemed to be persuasive, where I'd get these more seasoned business people that would take a chance and say, okay, we'll give the 23-year-old kid a shot. And some of them are still customers today, kind of thing. So, but yeah, that's what happened. It took a few months of kind of flopping along, but there was that definite, very precise moment where I made a firm decision that no matter what happens, I will succeed at this. And when that change happened, the business started to pick up customers. And so I'm not real big on a lot of excuses, because I had plenty of excuses. Like I said, we got a baby, we got one on the way, we got no money. I'm having to sell cable TV door to door just to get by. And we did not have a pot to piss in. I mean, we were living on a couple $100s a week for quite a while. I mean, for 3 years, actually, when I worked for Mark, because as much as I love Mark, he didn't pay me very much. So, all right, I'm going to look at the comments. Look at allergies. Yeah, this time of year especially. Awkward Penguin very authentically and courageously admits that he's risk averse. I'm a vegetarian. Me too. Ish. I'm not 100%, but basically 29 out of 30 days of the month I'm a vegetarian. Allergy conditions do change over a person's lifetime, as from year to year, depending on the allergy season, of course, too. I can still walk miles, even with a mask on. Just that pit sweating thing was not cool when it started. That is weird. I mean, it came around. So you had the moment. You had that moment. Did any doubts or moment of doubts creep in? Yes. Every single day. And Awkward Penguins, did you have anything saved up when you made that decision? No, I had nothing. We were living paycheck to paycheck, moment to moment, day to day. We had nothing. And we did for 3 years. Like I said, when I worked for Mark, I was only getting paid a couple $100 a week. I finally convinced him to kick it up to $300 for a while there in the period before the business kind of went under. So you just called random businesses in the phone book. It's exactly what I did. In fact, one thing I did that was kind of smart back then was a couple things. First of all, in Indiana, we didn't observe daylight savings time. So during the winter, I could call into Ohio, where the long distance phone rates were a little lower, because I could call between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. in the morning, where they were already open for business, but we weren't. Things like that. I would go get a magazine at the store. Back then there was no internet, okay? So I'd go get a magazine, And I'd find an ad in the magazine that was in the back of the magazine that was black and white. Okay? So my mindset was this. I would say, okay, the advertiser, so I remember there was like a Condé Nast Traveler magazine. So it's like a travel magazine. And it's advertising things like cruises and resorts, golf resorts, things like that. Okay. So I would look for an ad in the back of the magazine that was black and white. Why? Because if I found an ad in the magazine that was black and white, it would have an 800 number, which meant I could call them for free. They're paying for the phone call. But whoever can't afford a full page or a half page color ad is probably a smaller business. And the odds that I'll actually be able to get through to a decision maker on the 800 number are higher. And you know what? It worked. Not a ton, but it worked. I got the Marriott at Sawgrass down in, I think they're in Florida. A couple major resorts that became customers that I found them just by getting a magazine and then looking for the ads that were a little smaller. Just thinking maybe that means I can reach somebody. I won't just get a $5 an hour call handler person, right? So I did things like that, creatively to try to figure out how can I save a penny here and a penny there on my phone bill so that I can make more calls, It was hard. Financially, absolutely it was hard. We were pretty poor. But the thing was, by doing it a lot, you talk about starting a YouTube channel, where you're teaching something or doing a course, right? I could do a course on sales, on how to design a sales process. I could take a product, and I could craft a sales methodology for you that would work if you used it, if you did it. Okay. That would be a multi-step. This is business-to-business selling. Okay, this is not calling on consumers at home, not at all. Although it was telemarketing, but it was business-to-business. I would never call on consumers. Oh my God. And you learn how to craft say yes questions that help you move the sales conversation forward. Things like that. You learn how to break the sales process up into multiple steps where you don't try to call the person and close the sale today. That's a legitimate approach. You can do it that way. Some people do. For me, I favored a more measured approach where I would take a little more time to let the psychology behind it kind of went like this. If I call the person and I have one simple question that I want to get answered, that's kind of a yes or no question where whether or not the answer is yes or no, it moves the relationship forward. Okay? So, for example, if I'm selling telephone message on hold service, where this is, if they subscribe to this service, then when somebody calls their business, they're going to get put on hold, which they do all the time. Well, when you're sitting on hold, you would hear me saying, hey, thanks for calling XYZ company. Hey, did you know that this month we've got this and that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's what that is. We've all heard it, and we all hate it, don't we? No, that's okay. It's still an okay business. But so now the question would be, you call a business and you say, well, listen, I was just curious, do you guys put people on, we're just doing some market research. Do you guys put people on hold at least 5 times an hour? Think about that. That's a say yes question, because it's likely the answer is yes. And if the answer is no, I don't want to waste my time talking to them anyway, because they don't need my service. So I'd ask this one question and say, okay, that's all I need to know. Hey, I'll let you go. And by the way, though, if I call, who would make the decision about maybe marketing related stuff? And now that they know I'm going to hang up the phone, they're happy to tell me who the contact person is because they know they're about to get rid of me. And I'm not wasting their time. You see what I'm saying? So I make that one call, and now I've got this person's name and number. I know who the contact person is, and I know that they put people on hold at least 5 times an hour. Think about that. This is a live one here. So now I'll just wait a week. and call the person and ask for the specific person. So this is just one example of the kinds of things I would do. And what would happen is I would I'd break it up into 3 or 4 or 5 different calls where each call was very short. And what would happen is by the 3rd or 4th call, the decision maker would be like, oh yeah, the message on hold. Oh yeah. It's like they knew me. And they'd be more likely to take my call as opposed to just trying to get rid of me. Things like that. So those are things you just learn, right? Out of necessity. You're like, you better figure it out, buddy, because if you don't, you're not making any sales today. Are you guys getting this? Well, you can do that. That's perfectly legitimate today. Pick a product, pick a service, invent it. Just invent something and go start crafting a way to build up a little bit of credibility. I mean, you can go the other route that people do today. You can do advertising on Facebook and you can all these things. I'm not into that at all. I don't do that. Not interested. Nothing wrong with it. It's not my cup of tea. But yeah, so that's what I did. And it took quite a while. But in all reality, here's what happens with any business situation like that. This is what you will discover happens. I look at it as the sort of 2-week to 2-month, 2-year program. Okay? So what happens is the first 2 weeks, you're scared to death, right? You make all kinds of mistakes. You're discouraged. People hang up on you, which they will. Okay? So, but what happens is, but you make yourself, and actually it's 2 hours, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. What happens is, after you've done it for 2 hours, which means you've made about 40 or 50 calls, at least 20 or 30, maybe 40 or 50, okay? A couple hours go by, and you go, you know what? Actually, this isn't going to kill me. I don't really like it when I get this rejection, but basically, turns out I'm probably going to survive. Okay. That only took a couple hours. Well, what happens in a couple weeks? Well, in a couple weeks, you start getting some people that are being somewhat responsive, and you start saying to yourself, you know, maybe this is going to work. Maybe this will work. You know, I'm not sure yet, but maybe. That happens in a couple weeks. Well, what about the couple months? What happens in a couple months is the universe tests you. You get all kinds of rejection and all kinds of signals from the universe that says you're not going to succeed. Because the universe is testing you to see how serious you are with your commitment. But what happens in the first 2 months is you toughen up. You just do. You toughen your ass up and you realize, you know what? If I quit, I guarantee I'm not going to succeed. And by the way, this is Dave talking now. Usually when people fail at something they're trying to do, it's usually just because they quit. Because if they would have persevered, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, it will have turned out they would have actually succeeded. In fact, you're going to be most tempted to quit at the very hour that your success is going to start to happen. So you're going to quit just when, if you hadn't quit, you would have popped that sale. Guarantee you. And what happens is in 2 months, you actually get that first sale. It took you 2 months. Had to make 1,000 calls. It was terrible. It was brutal. But you didn't quit. And in 2 months, you actually start popping the sale, and you have more people who are actually being positive and responsive. And what happens after 2 months is you say to yourself, you know what? This is going to work. It's still hard. We're still struggling to pay the bills, but you know what? I can see it. It's starting to happen enough to where I know this scales. I can scale this. If I look at my statistics and my percentages, I know if I just do more of this, I'll get there. So after 2 months, that's where you get to. 2 months, and you're going, you know what? This is probably going to work. I think I'm going to be okay. Guess what happens in 2 years? You never have to worry about paying your bills again. Ever. You don't believe me? Okay. Don't believe me. Don't do it. Doesn't affect me. But everything I'm telling you is true. 2 hours, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. Now, if your business idea is stupid, you're trying to sell refrigerators to Eskimos, okay. You know, you still can do it. You're going to have some challenges maybe that a little smarter approach wouldn't have. But here's what you're going to tell yourself. You're going to tell yourself, I have to have all the answers to those questions. I have to have certainty before I start. That's what you're going to tell yourself. And you're going to make up all kinds of stories. This is why I talk about storytelling. I talk about religion, politics. These are all about stories we tell ourselves. You're going to tell yourself a story that you need to have all the answers before you can start. In other words, what you're really saying is, I need to have certainty. Guess what the universe is going to say to you? Nope, you don't get to succeed. Sorry, nope, you don't get to. Why? Because only the person who's willing to accept uncertainty gets to succeed. Why? Because they're the ones who deserve to. Sorry, the people who suffer through the uncertainty are the ones who deserve to succeed. And if you're not willing to suffer through the uncertainty, you don't deserve the success. You just don't. And so you're going to make up other stories. You're going to tell yourself that your friend across the street who didn't give up, who kept going and succeeded, you're going to start telling yourself stories about him or her. Yeah, he cheats his customers. He cheats on his taxes. He does this. You're going to find reasons to demonize your neighbor. You know why? Because deep down inside, you're jealous because you didn't have the courage to get through the difficulty that your neighbor did. And so you're going to make up a story about your neighbor that you're going to tell yourself to make yourself feel better. Why? Because this is what we do. We compare ourselves to our neighbors all the time. You know what my attitude is about my neighbors? And what my neighbors are doing? I don't care. I don't need to make up stories about my neighbors. You know why? Because I like my life. I'm doing what I do. Other people can do what they do. That's why I'm making a show. Why am I making a cartoon? Because I want to. You know, it's risky. It's risky. I may wind up working on this for a freaking year and a half, and like nobody wants to watch it. It could happen. That's why staying in the moment and asking myself this very important question. Do you actually love the work? You know, are the minutes and the hours worth it even if the show fails? Guess what? Yes, it's worth it. I've made the decision. It's worth it, even if the show fails. Therefore, I'm not worried about if the show's going to fail. Because what I'm doing and what I'm learning, the disciplines that I'm adopting, the distinctions that I'm making, the artistry that I'm developing, means that even if the show fails, do you really think there aren't somebody somewhere, somehow, that's going to maybe want Dave to do some animation or something? I mean, for crying out loud, I just showed you guys the promotional video I created for the Encourage TV YouTube channel just last week. I mean, there's stuff I can do that a lot of people can't, you know? So I'm not worried. Of course, opportunities are going to present themselves, and they may not be the ones I think. I don't care. It's fun. It's an adventure, man. All right, I'm going to look back up here. But I remember it was harder before there was an internet. But it's harder now for different reasons. It's harder now because the proliferation of social, basically of phones, actually. The proliferation of everybody has a phone in their pocket, and the fact that businesses are handling phone calls differently than they used to, you're way more likely to go straight to a voicemail today and be completely ignored on multiple levels in a way that we didn't deal with back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s. So I would say that the phone-based approach to business actually has some challenges today that are worse than 20 years ago. That would be my personal assessment. You still can do it, and I do it, but there are some things about it that are kind of challenging. Okay, so let me see here. Living a dream is always awesome. Congrats to your friend for following his dream. Okay, hold on. I got to go up here. I've missed a lot. Okay, guys, I'm gonna take a couple minutes here and catch up on all these comments. So I'm way back to Awkward Penguin. Way back when Awkward said, "Did you have any money saved up when you made the decision to just balls to the wall? You're gonna succeed." And the answer was emphatically no. We had nothing. Hell, we didn't have anything saved for about 20 years. You want to know the truth? I'm sure you canceled it out quickly because you had to. I tried having a business several times, but that was nothing more than an independent job. So you just call random businesses in the phone. Yep. These are better stories for me. I hear one on Facebook of a friend. A lot of the stories you're going to hear about business are going to present a story that amounts to a way to get the success quickly. All of those are lies, okay? If somebody sells you for $49.99 an investment program on Facebook, they're probably not somebody you should be taking investment advice from. Now, they could be. There's a middle ground with investment in particular, only because if you run the numbers and you're actually a pretty good investor, trader, in order to actually make a respectable living, you would have to be moving about $1 million all the time, you know, in order to get your 0.25% that you earn today on your money. So there are reasons in the investment domain for people to be selling courses and things like that. But generally speaking, you want to be a little bit suspect of those guys. So there's better stories for me. Okay, so I don't know if I'm understanding this right, but I think Amar is saying, Dave, your story's not that great. There are better ones for me. I think that's what you said. I hear a Facebook friend of mine who's sort of new for at least 30 years. He's been doing art since high school for probably 40 years. He was talking about how he literally was an introvert, but he'd go up and down the street to sell his art skills. Well, that's impressive. I love that. That's awesome. He had the balls, and it helped. Yeah, and you know what? You know, for me, that's not as scary. In-person meetings and sales, like within a year or two after I started, if I were to actually meet with you, I would almost always close the sale. Almost always. But so for most people, doing it over the phone is harder. They're really scared of the phone typically. Living a dream is always awesome. Congrats to your friend for following his dream. Absolutely. I know very few artists that have done that. So, you know, and so what have I done over the years? I've done message on hold. I've done musical radio jingles. I've done corporate video. I've created commercials, obviously. I've done website development. I've created explainer videos, which is kind of an animation thing. And I've created feature films. Right? So, 2 months of calls to get one sale sounds horrifying. It is. It is not fun, Tiny Salad. It is not fun. And I'm not going to lie either. It's hard. As they say, the universe will test you. Now we have advertising at our fingertips to reach millions of people in minutes. Well, yeah, but okay, Spider, go do it. Go do it. Go reach millions of people in minutes. You're going to find out it's not that easy. Sounds easy, but it's not. Because if it was, everybody'd be doing it. That's true of everything that's hard. If it was easy, everyone would do it. I remember a coworker 20 years ago told me to focus on my art, a job will always be there, but I never would listen. But he was right. Yeah, I mean, I hope and kind of believe that that's probably true. You know, I mean, I know your art, Amar. I know your YouTube channel. I know what your capabilities are, basically. And yes, I agree. You have the skill and the talent and the ability to do just fine. No question. Yeah, I wish I could have followed art more, but followed IT work. Well, yeah, but you know what, Spider? I'll tell you this little secret. One of the things I love to do most, like almost more than anything, like if you put a gun to my head and say you got to do one thing for the rest of your life, you know what it would be? Programming. It'd be writing code. I love writing code. I mean, you know, C, C++, Delphi, PHP, JavaScript, Euphoria. Of course, that's a language nobody's heard of. But, I mean, yeah, I've done a lot of coding. It's a lot of fun. Wish I could have followed art more. IT work, which is perfectly respectable. Had no faith in myself to believe in myself. Yeah, Amar, I didn't have faith in myself either. I was just desperate to not work for the man. I was desperate. I was like, God bless it, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do it. Come hell or high water, I'm going to find a way. And it was tough. Creativity is a leap of faith and dedication. I believe that everything you live feeds into it. Amar, maybe you needed the doubt before. Yeah, I agree with that. Maria, that's a really, really good point. There are seasons of life. This goes back to the 2 to 8 year cycle I talked about the other day. You know, the 4-act play of life. It is never too late to start. It's never. We all have a bunch of 2 to 8 year segments in our life that all play out. And it's never too late. Having bread on the table is also important. And if you're a couple, what typically happens is you share the load, right? That's what happens. Actually, this is wrong. Oh yeah, he shrugs. I forgot. He shrugs. So probably, yeah, what we need to do here is make a little... I'm yakking so much that I'm forgetting not doing my job. Not doing my job here, people. So what I'm going to do is hit the control key and actually stretch this up. Like that. I'm just going to cheat and stretch it. E key. Get rid of that. Nothing about anything I'm talking about is easy. Nothing about it is easy. Emotionally. Some things about business is easy, actually. It's not all drudgery, that's for sure. But emotionally it is difficult. Okay, so I'm going to make a duplicate of that and then just do the same thing again. People, when I tell the story, I'm telling you the truth, man. I lived it. But I think, I suspect, because I can be a fairly dynamic guy at times, that I think that people have maybe looked at me and thought it was easier. Like that's easy for you kind of thing. That's easy for you, but I couldn't do it kind of thing. And I just never believed that about myself or anyone else. I think it's hard for everybody, and we all have strengths and weaknesses. Okay, yeah, and then we just need to reverse these two shots, right? So this is 12, 13, 12. So this is 15, 16. This needs to be 15. And then 11, I believe, yeah, is back to 14. So there we go. I think we're done with the ink. I think it might be time to paint. Now I'm going to have to... Okay, so looking here. Bread on the table is important. Yep. Hated that. I've learned that hating others just generally is a waste of energy and soul. Oh, man. Thank you, Maria. That's for sure. Totally agree. Hating others is a total waste of time. No, that story was a post from a fellow artist I knew growing up in Chicago. He was sharing his story. Is there money in explainer videos? I've made about... And by the way, Max, there was something... Oh, yeah. Max, you're here. A couple days ago, you posted a comment, and it was a link. And I did watch the link. And the camera work was good, So Max says, is there money in explainer videos? I've really only done 2 explainer videos, and they both paid me about $2,000. So, and it's going to take you about a week or so to do it, I would say. About 2, but you know what? And I've compared that, by the way. I've gone out on Fiverr, and you find these things, hey, for $50, explainer video, blah, 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 blah. And when you chase down the Fiverr thing and get it to the quality level that I'm talking about, you're in the price point similar to what I made doing explainer videos, $1,000 to $2,000. So yeah, there's plenty of money to be made in explainer videos. The trick is finding people, finding the decision makers who are making the decision to spend money on explainer videos. So there's a bit of a sales job there. I do IT as well. Yep, I kind of knew that actually, Amar. My own work route's been in the administrative assistant field. Not great money, blah, blah, blah. Enough to live on. Fighting myself, let my job, kick me to the curb because I'm not taking the jab. That's a choice you're making, and this might be a turning point in your life, man. So, Roger Van Garnier, I think I'm saying that wrong. Well, artistic career is very Wild West sort of thing. Yeah, lots of competition, short-lived projects, participating in lots of freelancing, and you need to be top level these days. I completely reject that statement, Roger. to be considered at even serious gigs. I completely disagree. Roger, I don't know how to say your name. Well, I'll call you Roger, okay? I completely disagree with Roger. It's not a stable career, so to speak. Okay, number one, yeah, absolutely. Wait, are you saying, Max, are you talking to me? I go get gigs and then get 10% from your explainer videos? No, not interested, not going to do it. There's a lot of business things that are coming across my desk that relate to just all kinds of things. A lot of it has to do with YouTube and stuff, where I'm telling other people the same thing I'm telling you. Nope, not me. I mean, I'm not involved. I'm creating a cartoon. That's it. That's all I'm doing. I have no interest in anything else. Don't need anything else. Not going to help anybody else achieve their goal other than what they learned from me, maybe watching me work on my cartoon. And someday there may be a time for like some collaborative stuff, but basically my focus is totally on this. So the reason I disagree with Roger, which is really Roger Van Genil or something, I don't know if you're French, but is this. Every level of capability you have as an artist has a place in the marketplace. I totally saw this in the radio jingle mode. Most of the radio jingles you hear on the radio are really, really awful. Because usually they're produced by musicians who actually aren't very good at what they do, and they gravitated to jingles because they couldn't make money doing music in any other way. So the bar is really low in the jingle field, okay? But yet that has a place, right? So if you make really stupid cheeseball explainer videos that don't look very good, that's okay. There is absolutely a place for that in the market. Whatever it is you do, there's a place. Believe me. Now, you may not like that place. You may have aspirations to do a level or quality of work higher than what you're actually qualified to do today. That's totally normal. That's totally normal. If you want to play the game, then do what you can do and keep working on building your skills. Because Roger is correct that there are plenty of arenas where the standards are sufficiently high that you really need to be at a certain level just to be able to play in the sandbox. That is definitely true. But welcome to the real world. If you were working as an electrical engineer, designing the electrical system for a product or a building or whatever it is you're doing, you kind of need to be qualified to do that work, because if you do a bad job, people die. As artistic types, we can at times have a tendency to forget that standards are kind of a good thing. And especially because we're operating in an arena where it's easy to be self-taught, which means you have the ability to not get that good at what you're doing if you want to go ahead and be fairly crappy at it. I've been as guilty as anybody. I created really crappy jingles for many, many years. There went Valerie. I really did. Okay, am I flipped here? I'm not flipped. So, okay, so Spider says, I'm a network engineer. His job's pushed me to take the jump into art 100%. That's cool. Hard to give up the paychecks. Yep, that's what my friend, who wanted to be in the music business, songwriter, country singer kind of guy, that's what he said. Can't give up my golden handcuffs, he said. To which I said, okay, don't give up your golden handcuffs. It's all good. The question is whether you can live with yourself. Because there's nothing wrong with taking the paycheck, and if you're satisfied, I'm not going to be the guy that sits here and says, because look, there's something very important about this I want to say emphatically to you guys. Yes, Spider, the line is for the paint fill, so that everything closes, because when I do the fill check, we still have some holes that have to be filled, actually. So I'm not going to tell you guys, like, sitting here drawing cartoons is not actually the most satisfying thing ever. Okay? It's not. It's cool, but it's not that cool. Right? If you took it away from me tomorrow, my life would continue. Believe me, it's just not that big of a deal. I don't have a need to do this. It's a cool challenge and I'm having fun, but it's not making my life amazing. Trust me, I'm not lying to you on this. It's not like my life is this endless peak experience because I'm sitting here working on a cartoon. So if you're getting a good paycheck and you're not willing to give it up, I'm not going to be the guy that says, oh yeah, you're going to hate yourself, you're going to kick yourself years from now. Maybe you will, but you might not. You might go, you know what, I made the prudent choice, and it's all good. You know, this artsy fartsy, it's like we tell ourselves that this is just like, oh, it'd be so amazing to just be creative all day. No, it's not amazing. You can do it if you want. It's cool, but it's not that great. You know, if Maria's in Dutch, okay, thank you. If Maria's an administrative assistant and she can have the enjoyment of being kind to a person today who came into her office and was having a bad day, you know what? It might well turn out that when we look back on our lives, that Maria's the one that actually is the most satisfied of all of us. Okay? I really, really mean that. And it's like when I said earlier, I wasn't kidding, that the most pleasurable thing I've ever done, where I literally could just sit there all day and do it, has been programming. You know? I'm sure I'll come back to it. It's really, really cool. Hell, I spent about a month, not this last summer, but the summer before, so summer of 2020, I think it was. I spent a month where I didn't make much progress on animation stuff because I was obsessed with really, really grokking and understanding what really happens in the JavaScript programming language. Because I had a distinct impression that most people don't understand JavaScript at all and how it really works under the hood. And you know what I found out? I found out I was right. Not only was I right, but some of the most foremost experts in the field, like Doug Crockford, actually are getting key things about JavaScript wrong. And they don't even know it. Oh, that's a pretty bold thing to say. Pretty bold claim there, Dave. Okay. You know, someday I'll publish my findings. But, I mean, I really did a lot of research on it, and I found out, yeah, actually, everybody's actually doing JavaScript wrong. Pretty crazy. Oh, I laugh at life. Life is funny to me. Okay. I'm not getting younger. Neither am I, dude. 55 in a month. After years of animations, I trust you on leaving animation. After years of animations, I trust you on leaving animation. I don't know. I'm not sure I understand, Max. You tend to leave. You make these cryptic chat statements where I'm like, what the heck is he even saying? After years of animation, I trust you on leaving animation. In other words, you're saying based on your experience, you can see where I would say, okay, if I can't do animation anymore, I'm still happy. I'm still going to have a good life because I find some other things to do that are just as cool. Is that what you're saying? I don't know if I'm understanding. I do hold the JavaScript secrets. Yeah. Well, I'll give you guys this. This is so funny. Okay. There's an idiom called an iffy in JavaScript, which is an immediately instantiated function expression. Okay, and what I realize is that, which is prevalent, you see it everywhere in JavaScript, you know, tutorials, documentation, everywhere. But actually, there's a different thing called a defo that I invented, which is a dynamically instantiated function object, which actually makes way more sense and is actually consistent with the way JavaScript actually works under the hood. Because what the people that propagate the iffy are doing is they're writing code where they wrap the whole function in a pair of parentheses, and then they put a parentheses after it, so that the function winds up being executed immediately upon running the code. Okay, you don't have to call the function; it runs automatically. Okay, this is an immediately instantiated function expression. The problem is that none of them tell you that actually if you took these parentheses and removed them, it would still immediately execute. And it's actually the parentheses at the end of it that are causing it to execute. And in point of fact, if you instead said variable x equals new, using the new keyword function, new function, and then you write your function, the fact that you use the new keyword function actually also causes it to instantiate immediately and return its value to x. And you get all the benefits of the iffy with one difference. In the case of the iffy, it can only ever be executed once. In fact, it can be proven that within the code, the function that you just wrote, per everyone's recommendation, actually becomes orphaned, and the code is lost in the ether and can never actually be called again. Now, sometimes that's a desirable thing. For like instantiating an object where you're calling a function just to basically, it's like a constructor in C++, same idea, right? So the dynamically instantiated function object, which is really what you want, and it goes way deeper than that, because what you find out is what people think is happening. You have to look at everything in a debugger, but what you find out is what people think's happening when you do certain things with functions in JavaScript is not what's happening. It's we're going deep down the rabbit hole here. But it's pretty interesting. It was really interesting to find out what I found out when I was dinking around with grokking out what's really going on with JavaScript. But all of which no one here has any interest in at all. I get it. Believe me, folks. Okay, I'm going to jump over here. Checkmate. I'm not going to color this now. I'm just going to go ahead and check my animation, and then I'm going to color it later and end the session, because I'm basically sick of working on it. You know, little bit with his hair there and there. So the two middle sequences, I'm not happy with the hair. That's something about the left, you know, from my standpoint, looking at the screen, the left side hair it's not right. That right there is okay, although it's too poofy up here. We got to unpoofy that. And then this hair here is wrong. It's okay, it's close. This needs to have a couple lumpies. And then that's okay. So yeah, there's some things I still have to change to get this right. Okay, so COBOL, yeah, COBOL. I never learned COBOL. My dad learned COBOL. Criminy. Came across it. Okay, so let me go back here. I want to look at what Max was trying to say. JavaScript is like a side chick. You do it and go back to your wife. No, I disagree. I think JavaScript is okay. So like in research circles, for the most part, if you're going for an interpreted language because you basically don't want to have to go through the compile and link cycle and all the rest, then for sure, in scientific circles they've embraced Python. Probably because it's you've got file functions all baked in. Whereas with JavaScript, you would have to be talking to a server and maybe have PHP do the file operation. So for that reason, as a standalone language, Python really is kind of, I would say, probably top of the game as far as interpreted languages go, right? I personally favor JavaScript. I'm like, okay, let's run it off a server. Let's use PHP for functions or for file operations. And because JavaScript is so performant. I mean, JavaScript is very near to compiled code performance in many things. It's really, really performant because you got the GPU basically taking a lot of the load off your hands, right? JavaScript on the browser is an incredible platform. And programs like TradingView, you could name a lot of them, but there's so many platforms that are, basically websites, that are functioning as apps that really demonstrate the amazing capability of the document object model, the GPU acceleration in the browser. It's amazing what you can do today with JavaScript, with code that just runs instantly. It's really awesome. Okay, so yes, that's it. I'm late with comments. YouTube broke a couple times. Sorry about that. Okay, from an artist perspective, start doing anything strictly front end. Right, and obviously there's a place for that. I do front end and back end. I've designed websites for clients, and I've done fairly massive projects that were JavaScript and PHP, basically using PHP on the back end for file ops and whatnot. Thing I dislike about coding it, but some real programmers tend to love, is debugging. I don't. I'm very big. I'm a strict programmer. Like when I'm programming, I write tons of comments. There's way more comments than code, right? Because it's like I know I'm not even going to understand it when I go back and look at it a month later, right? So I'm really, really strict about comments and stuff, to the point of the ridiculous. All right. Since we're talking JavaScript, let's talk about Node. Node is great. Yeah, Node's great. What do you think about NPM, the repository? It's amazing, dude. You might hate it with a passion, and I'm sure, yeah, okay, so I get your point. You see, you're talking about, you see that all over any kind of repository situation, right? You're going to have, it's the reason I don't build Opentoonz, right? Why haven't I built Opentoonz or Tahoma on my own machine? I just don't want to deal with dependency hell. I just don't. And I don't want to install, Microsoft's compiler just because if I want to have the least painful situation, I need to follow a certain development protocol that has worked reasonably well for others, like Tom, by the way. I don't want to deal with dependency hell. And I've never seen it fail. I actually tried setting up a build system on my Linux laptop, and immediately things that should have worked broke. And it's like, okay, now I'm going to spend days trying to solve that just so I can build the app and then begin to grok the code, and figure out how things work. It wasn't worth it. I just not interested. I'm too busy making a cartoon. So if you talk about the NPM system with Node, what I've found, I haven't programmed with Node other than the extent to which I've looked at its implementation behind Electron as a platform for creating standalone applications with JavaScript, okay? So if you're going to go down that road, you need Node, okay? But I think on principle, as a sort of a throughput platform that gives JavaScript really impressive performance in real time in a client-server climate, combined with a really huge repository of pre-baked code, a lot of which saves you time. In that sense, Node's great. But as far as being security-wise problematic, I have no idea. Never knew, never cared. But, on principle, Node as a server, for real-time internet applications, obviously that's kind of what it was developed for. And then getting rid of the problem, basically being able to do file operations directly through JavaScript. In that sense, Node's cool. That's all I would say about it, is it's cool. May not be creating it as a global function because JavaScript used to have weird errors. Well, what you're saying, okay, I get where you're coming from with what you just said, Max, about as a global function. In the context we're talking about with JavaScript, that observation doesn't quite apply. Okay. Everything I said about the default versus the iffy has to do with a local function that you're returning one of a couple things from it. When you execute a JavaScript function, if you want to understand JavaScript, if I was giving a person one piece of advice right now and said, how do you understand JavaScript? What's the one thing I could do that's going to help me understand what's really going on with this language, and particularly the code that I'm struggling with right now? This is what I would tell you. Always look at what the function returns. That's it. Look at what the function's returning. Is it returning an object? Is it returning another function? Is it returning a primitive value? Looking at what a JavaScript function returns tells you everything about what the programmer intended when they wrote that function. Trust me. I say that with supreme confidence. Supreme confidence. You can start a blog and interview people, Dave. Yeah, I could. Just another one of the 12 trillion things I could do. It could be thing of the past. Creating as a constructor may have worked well in the past as opposed to a global function. Again, Max, I don't get the impression that you're proficient with JavaScript. I get that you. If I was going to guess, I'd say you've done some programming and you're kind of making some guesses about what I'm talking about vis-a-vis JavaScript, but you don't actually know JavaScript that well, is what it sounds like to me from the way your comments are. It is extremely powerful. So no problem. Because, first of all, the idea of a global function in JavaScript is actually, I'll tell you a little secret about JavaScript. This is a great example of something most people don't really understand. There's actually no such thing as a global function in JavaScript. Can anybody tell me why? Manifestly, I guarantee you there are no global functions. There are no global functions or global variables in JavaScript. Did you know that? How can that be true? Everybody talks about globals in JavaScript and how you want to avoid them. But I'm telling you there are no such thing. Yep, I can tell. I can tell, Max, by the way you're framing your questions. I understand exactly where you're at mentally in terms of how you look at JavaScript and what you know about it. Okay, it's fine. I'm not insulting you, friend. Okay. And Amar is now weighing in about the new version of ECMA. ECMAScript is bullshit. 6 is bullshit. Why? Because I've unpacked the new idioms in the code, and the problem is that if what you value in code is scrutability, readability, grokkability, if what you value in code is the ability to look at the code and know what the hell's going on, all of the new additions to the language in ECMA 6 only decrease your ability to understand what was intended in the code while actually not saving you any keystrokes at all. I'm telling you. No, it's not because it's stateless. Good guess, Tom. That's not why. It's not because it's stateless. That has nothing to do with it. The reason there are no globals in JavaScript is because every single function you write and every variable you create is in fact owned by an object. There is no global. Now in Node, there is a global, but it's an object called global. In the browser, there's an object called window. Actually, all the functions you own, if you don't attach them to an object, are in fact attached to an object. They're attached to the window. So there is no global, which means that if you really want to get good with JavaScript, you have to start thinking about objects. You have to start thinking about objects and what owns what. And the way you work with functions informs that. And that's why looking at what a function returns tells you everything about what a function does. So as an exercise with my little defo mechanism, one thing I played around with was I wanted to completely reproduce the functionality of jQuery. I mean, you think about what jQuery does, it's pretty impressive. You got a function here called $, and everything you're doing that's meaningful is in the parentheses. So in other words, everything that you're thinking of as being some kind of object is in fact an argument to a function. To which you say, well, then what's being returned to me here? Can you reproduce that functionality in JavaScript? It's actually pretty easy, but you're not going to do it successfully very easily if you don't understand how the language works. That's why, and it's very elegant, what that means is that zillions of people have been able to use jQuery very effectively without ever understanding how it works. And that's cool. That's like a really good component model. That's what made Delphi good back in the day, was the custom controls that encapsulated their functionality in a way that just found the sweet spot where you could use the components without having to understand how to make them if you didn't want to. Get it? Yeah, the object hierarchy. Exactly. There is no getting away from the object hierarchy in JavaScript. And a lot of people don't know that. They actually think there's global. There is no global. Everything's owned by the browser, or by the window, actually. And why is that important? It's important because when you begin to think about how the code's really working, you realize that everything owns something else. You're dealing with a hierarchy of things that own things, right? jQuery is an incredible invention. Now, there's an argument to be made for going native nowadays because there's been additions to the language. The additions to the language that basically supplanted jQuery and then made it performant, like query selector, for example, that's wonderful. Okay? Those additions to the language are great, but everything about ECMA 6, like arrow functions they're a monstrosity. They're a monstrosity because all they accomplish literally is make the code harder to read. That's my opinion, and you're not going to dissuade me. Now, does that mean I would never use an arrow function? No, I probably would under some circumstances. But no, and arrow functions aren't the only thing. There are other things that were... let me put it this way. Everything that was added to ECMA 6 was added to ECMA 6 to pander to C++ programmers who wanted to understand it the way they understand C++, but didn't want to do the hard work of understanding how JavaScript is different from C++, even though it looks the same. Syntactically, it looks the same, but it isn't the same. And they never wanted to do the hard work of understanding the language, and so the ECMA guys kind of finally gave in and basically added some shit to the language to make creating constructors and things like that way easier for C++ programmers. So now we have an even bigger community of programmers using JavaScript who don't understand the language. That's all it accomplished. Utterly stupid, because understanding the language actually isn't that hard. But it does take a little bit of effort. So yeah, a ton of browser objects, and it'll never learn or memorize them. Introspection is using Java 2 as a way to navigate an application when trying to understand it. Well, introspection meaning self-interrogation of objects of themselves kind of thing. It's kind of like what runtime type information, helps with things like that to help you sort of grok out within the code what the code's trying to do, blah, 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 blah. It's always better if you can look at the code and understand what it's trying to do. Okay? And that's why I don't like ECMA 6. So I continue. So in other words, okay, so you're going to see, you say there's var versus let. Okay? So if you use letx as opposed to varx, okay, you complain that, well, yeah, but this is so stupid. It's just so stupid. Because you're going to complain that varx is function scope instead of context scope or block scope. It's so stupid because there is nothing but function scope in JavaScript. This is just, I don't want to try to unpack this here. And now this is you talk about monstrosities. This is a monstrosity. Block scope was never necessary. It was never even hinted at being necessary. But C++ programmers looked at it and couldn't understand why variables were accessible outside of the scope where they thought it should be accessible. And that's because they never understood how the freaking functions worked. And the ECMA guy said, well, okay, so now we've got 3 different ways of creating variables when we had one that worked perfectly well across the board and was crystal clear if you just took half a second to figure out what was really going on. I'm telling you, no question at all. Let was never needed. Constructors were never needed, because if you create a function in JavaScript, okay, all right, I can't believe I'm going to do this. Okay, if I create a function X, there's maybe has an argument. Okay, and now we're within the scope. Here's the question is, what does it return? And what I return from the function actually is also in brackets, because what I return from the function is an object. So it's got object structure. Okay? Now that object that I'm returning from the function, so we got a bunch of crap here that instantiates the data that winds up going into this object. It instantiates the data. So this object doesn't just contain data, it also contains functions. So this is a complete self-contained object that does something, and the original function that I wrote is doing nothing more than instantiating everything I need to set up housekeeping so that I can then return this object into a variable x, or maybe if it's jQuery, it's $. And then all of a sudden that function that got returned, or that object that got returned that has functions as parameters, now has all kinds of cool capabilities that we can tap into just based on what arguments we send to the object that we return from the function. That's why JavaScript has functions that return functions, because there's a really good reason to. But you have to, I tell you guys, I speak from experience, you have got to stretch your brain in a way that as a C++ programmer, you never have to. Unless you're a really advanced C++ programmer who's very comfortable with passing around pointers to functions. Very comfortable with it. To the point where you're using it purposefully to set up, like arrays of functions that are essentially trying to add performance to a situation that otherwise would have been using either polling or a loop to judge a condition. And you want to make that more efficient by having direct pointers to functions, so you don't have to have the decision-making process that you have with a typical while loop situation. You do not ever have to stretch your brain as a C++ programmer in the way that you have to stretch your brain. It'll take you about a week probably, but you've got to stretch your brain in a way that you don't if you want to understand JavaScript. But once you understand it, you're going to go, oh, God, I get it now. It's so stupidly simple. It's ridiculous. It's so simple. And nobody ever told me. I told you. You know what I told you? Look at what a function is returning. That will tell you everything about what's going on in the JavaScript code almost every time. I promise you. Because you're going to look at a function that's returning a function that returns an object. You go, what the hell was that? Stretch your brain. Follow it through and think logically about what the person is trying to build and create for you to be able to use later in the code, like what jQuery does. If you can get past that, it'll actually make sense. The lights will come on. Okay, generally, unless you work at a small company, front end and back end. That's true. Right. Side chick. Ton of browser objects, which are generally pretty useful. Today's rules for life. I went through a lot of pain grokking out JavaScript. And when I realized what was really going on, I was like, God, this language is beautiful. And it doesn't need ECMA 6. There's nothing, trust me, ECMA 6 added literally nothing to the language. All it added was new syntax that made it easier for C++ programmers to still not understand the language. That's what it did. Utterly stupid. But add-ons in overly complex ways. With many other languages, it remains what it is. Doesn't change much. So, okay, I'm done. It's been 3 hours. I got my ink done. I got Asher done. I got the ink done on this guy. I got to change a couple things on his hair. I guess I could go in and do that right now. Change the hair. Okay, so what did I say? I'm looking at it over on the other screen in reverse. And yes, it was this. Okay, so this is a classic case of, boy. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to erase. Okay, don't need to erase that. And then this one's got to be modified. I think what I said was basically this is just poofed out a little too much. So now what I'm going to do is hit Control-C, Control-V, Control-V. Okay. No, I get impassioned about JavaScript because I did do the hard work of really coming to understand the language. And once I understood it, I was like, oh man, you don't have to add anything to this language. everything you're trying to do. I mean, in other words, as a programmer who thinks about architecture, architecture of your code and objects you want to build so that you can, make things that make things. And, if you think about object hierarchies and elegant code, everything you need to do what you want to do is right there in the language, just as it is today. But you just don't understand the language. And I again, say that as the guy who didn't understand the language. I was that guy. And it was hard. It was really hard, actually. Quite difficult. I had to do a lot of really small functions that were returning objects and things like that, where I was looking at it in the debugger like, what's actually going on here? Maybe I'll publish the code sometime, because I think that as an overall paradigm, if you wanted one object type that basically encompasses everything you ever want to do in the language, the default does it. It literally encompasses everything. I know that's a bold claim. I know. Some of you aren't going to believe me. I get it. I wouldn't believe me either. Okay, let's go back here. We got a little bit of poof here as well. Okay, so now we got hair that's jumping around. That's not cool. Right there. Okay, so this is wrong. Darn. Shoot. And this is the same. Okay. And that stays for quite a while. So I'm going to hit S key. Grab this. And I'm actually going to just paste it in. Boy, oh boy. And now I have to look at which one that was. So it's the outside one I got to get rid of. So E key. Later, dude, thanks for showing. I'm not gone yet. Yeah. You can use vanilla JavaScript to do anything in the browser. That is absolutely true. Absolutely true. But for most people, most of the time, tools like jQuery definitely will make your job easier. Okay, this is not horrible, actually. But I think I wanted to flatten that out just a little bit. And then it seems to me... What the heck? I gotta look over here. Yeah, it was actually this. This is what was bugging me. It's so weird how I can see it. When I flip the screen, I see it, is what's going on here. So, okay. So now I gotta... I think what I want to do is go like this. Wait, that might still be a little too fluffy. I'm gonna go... I want to just get the indicators in there so I can feel it and see it. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Okay. Yes. Now connect the dots. All right. Things are making a little more sense around here. Sheesh. No, I could write a book on JavaScript. I could write a book. I even wrote to Douglas Crockford and told him that there's stuff that you're talking here in your books that it's like 90. I mean, he's the guru of JavaScript. I'm like, honestly, and we had a little conversation. There's like, most of what you're doing is awesome, but on this one point, you're kind of giving out bad information, buddy. Oh dear. Okay, so now what are we going to do? Well, we got to grab all this. Shoot. I'm giving myself a lot of busy work here. All this. Well, let's just go S, V. Man. Yep, got to do some erasing. Sorry. Okay, so here's this. This is one of those dyslexia moments where I have to be really careful that I'm erasing the right line because I can literally look at it and a moment later I can't tell which one it was. Dyslexia moment. Very, very frustrating, my friends. Very, very frustrating. Oh, yes. Very frustrating. Okay. E key. E key. Now, JavaScript's the bomb. Like at this point, if I was going to do the code thing, I'm just going to create an application that's going to be a cloud-based app using JavaScript in the browser. Don't particularly care about let's see. I guess I'm going to have to start over here. Don't particularly care about, oh darn it, that was not supposed to happen, about standalone apps per se, although I wouldn't be opposed to that. At least so far, Node has not been my cup of tea. Got no problem with it, just not that interested in fiddling with it. Oh, I think I got it. Let me see here. Control Shift R. Okay, wow. You can use NLJ. Okay, once you find that, you find so if you know a manager that needs a grunt to do explainer videos, feel free to connect me. A manager that needs a grunt to do explainer videos. Closest I come to that. Okay, so if a client came along and was going to pay me a couple $1,000s to do an explainer video, I wouldn't be calling you because I'd do it. For two reasons. One is I'm going to take the money, number one. And number two, I don't know for sure that you can do the job. Okay? Having said that, I'm using a pen. I'm using a pen display. I'm using a XP Pen Digital Artist 15.6. Thank you, Amar. Yes, exactly right. It's a 15.6, and I think it's the original version of that, which may have a different name than what it has nowadays. But so yeah, as far as doing explainer videos, Max, I'm gonna. Right. Yeah, well, I don't know anybody that needs that. Although, here's the deal. Maybe when my son Kyle's got some stuff he's working on, that there may come a time when he wants to farm out some production related to digital signage, which is usually more simple, kind of a lot more simple actually than what we call an explainer video. Because usually digital signage is just essentially a slideshow. But that's definitely a area of opportunity at this point in history. All right, let's see if the hair's looking okay. You notice I kind of flipped Mel, so what he is in the animation and what he is on the show is actually flipped. Okay, that looks better. Okay, so with that I quit. 319, holy smokes, guys. This has been a very, very fun, I don't know about you guys, maybe it hasn't been fun for you guys. It's been fun for me today. It actually makes me want to go write some JavaScript code. That's kind of creepy. All right, so with that, I will just simply end it today and say, as you guys know, there will be